Hey, what's up, guys? We have Seth Adam Cohen here to talk about consciousness and AI. So, how are you doing today, Seth?
I am great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. I asked on a random subreddit for people to come on and talk about idealism and analytic idealism, and he responded, and I'm grateful for that. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll go from there?
Sure. My background, I started my professional background in media with a bent towards media for social good, social activism through media, which eventually put me over into just being a kind of a professional activist and politician and working in politics, trying to, obviously the world is a scary place right now. I saw this coming 10, 20 years ago and was working to preclude the current situation. Uh, Over time, that started because when I first hit the professional, when I graduated college, digital video was the new hot media technology, right? It was changing the world. I knew I wanted to help the world in the right direction, and so I thought digital video was the way to go. I ended up, I have an Emmy nomination. I produced a Super Bowl commercial. I had a nice little Hollywood career, but then
Wow.
again, Hollywood, talks a good game about social impact and stuff, but when push comes to shove, it's all just talk. So that's when I got kind of pulled more and more into activism and politics. I started a couple nonprofits. I ran a super PAC for a while. This all kind of in about 2018, all this activity really started pointing towards the fourth industrial revolution, the coming automation, AI, etc. This was back in 2018. It was still, we were talking about it in the future tense. Here we are, 7 years later, and we're smack in the middle of this transformation that we didn't prepare for, right? That whole time I was hoping we could be proactive and preempt this situation. But of course, we don't do that either as citizens, but our government certainly is not proactive. And so here we are facing a real issue with AI and robotics. Meanwhile, my kind of personal passion is this exploration of consciousness, right? And it all plays in together because I believe that technology, especially AI, but also and particularly quantum technology, is leading us towards an inflection point, both in a societal way, but also in our relationship to consciousness. And basically, just to put it out there, I believe that consciousness is the fundamental substrate of the universe, and even beyond our universe, the extended universe. And I believe I'm a non-dualist, so I believe we are all. There's only one thing. There's just consciousness. That's it. Everything else is a mirage.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like a hot take, at least in the West, the idealist view. I could be wrong about that, but I hadn't even heard of idealism. But then I found about 3 years ago, like I said before, when I asked people to come on through this subreddit, I got a guy on from Saudi Arabia, and he told me that he believes in what you believe, idealism. I hadn't even heard of it. I was interested in consciousness. I had heard people talk, but I didn't even know idealism, materialism. Um, so I haven't met too many people who believe in idealism. I feel like over here in the West, we're mostly materialists, right? I mean, most scientists will say they're materialists, which means they believe everything is material and all the consciousness comes from the material of our brain, correct? But you
Correct.
believe we're
The
living inside of consciousness, meaning we're almost inside of some sort of massive kind of almost kind of like a massive brain or something, or
Sort of. So the mainstream view in the West is that our brains somehow manifest consciousness, right? That we have evolved to the point where our brain is so sophisticated that it somehow creates this thing called consciousness that we don't actually even know what that is, but we believe it comes out of the brain, right? And most people believe that there is some level of consciousness in and other types of animals, but that's pretty much as far as it goes. However, you're right, in the East, and certainly in certain religions, but even beyond religion, let's say in India, the Hindu faith is not really a traditional religion the way we think of it in the West, right? Hindu is really began with a philosophy, and I've done a lot of reading and research into Hindu philosophy, and they basically believe the same thing, that there's only one. They talk about Amen and Brahman, sorry, uh, Atman Brahman, which is kind of God and the individual soul, and we're just what they call Maya, which is, and it's an illusion. There is no actual difference between God and which they basically define more how we define consciousness, rather than as like some guy up in the clouds that is like judging us, right? So yeah, I believe there is a long tradition in the West, in the East, sorry, but even in the West. So I don't know if you're familiar with Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World. He's a very famous intellectual from the first half of the 20th century.
I know of him, but I definitely haven't like read any of his work or really even. I don't really know too much about Brave New World. I mean, I think I know the plot, but
Brave New World, yeah, I mean it's his most famous work. It's about an alternate future, or not an alternate future. It's a future very much like the future we're currently building, where there's the haves and the have-nots that live in totally segregated societies, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, the reason I brought him up is that he also wrote a book called The Perennial Philosophy. And it came out in the 50s. And basically, it was arguing that all major religions and spiritual traditions throughout the history of the world have all been saying the same thing. And what they're saying is non-dual and idealistic. And there's a long tradition of Western thinkers who believe this, but somehow, even though some of our great, great thinkers, people like Huxley, but also Carl Jung, Tesla, we're all very much on the record as being non-dualist and idealist. But so despite that, we still ended up with a mainstream science and not beyond science, right? All of our mainstream culture and thought in America is now materialist, not idealist. I don't know exactly why that happened. I heard someone told me, and I haven't done the deep dive to really figure this out, but this does ring true, that back, 200, 300 years ago, and even further back, religion owned the mind, right? Anything revolving around the mind, meaning mind is probably the wrong word, but consciousness even was the domain of religion. And so when current modern day science started to develop over time, they had to kind of stay out of the church's way, because the church was had more power at the time than science. And so they kind of carved out a very physical path for science, where they just kind of ignored all that stuff that they said, that's the domain of the church, and we're going to stick to the materialist world. And just to be clear, for anyone that isn't familiar with these terms, materialist means physical thing, right? If we can't measure it with some scientific microscope or whatever, then it doesn't exist. That's the bottom line. The idealist view is that there's consciousness exists. We can't measure consciousness, right? We don't even know what it is. So how could we measure it, right? So So I do think even in the West, there's a long tradition. Alex Huxley, Tesla, all these people who have been saying for hundreds of years now that we live in a idealist and non-dualist world universe. But again, that has been kind of lost to history, and the vast majority of people in the West currently are the opposite,
Yeah, and I didn't
which
mean,
is
yeah,
problematic, by the way. But go ahead.
yeah, I definitely didn't mean to make it sound like it was, weird or unusual. It seems like, I mean, to be honest with you, like,
Oh,
I
it
just
definitely is. Oh, it is
well,
weird.
it is weird and unusual. But I mean, I didn't like. I know a lot of people, a lot of credible people do believe in it. It just kind of seems like for whatever reason, more people believe in
Oh, certainly.
materialism.
No, much more. I mean, 97% of the West is materialist. And it's because we were all brought up in a materialist society, right? From the time we were born, and as soon as certainly once we went into schooling, there was no question. This was a settled issue, right? There was never even like this idea that, oh, maybe there's this other worldview. At least in my upbringing, that was not even a possibility, right? Although, again, when you look at religion, and again, I'm not a religious guy, but and I'm certainly I was born to a Jewish family. Again, I'm not religious, but Jesus Christ, one of his like famous lines is that the kingdom of heaven is within you. Right. This is a very idealist view. This is the idea that God is within you. Right. And in my view, God and consciousness can be used interchangeably, right? Again, I'm not talking about some guy sitting in the clouds. I'm talking about a force. Think of it more like gravity, although it's a much higher level force than gravity because gravity is within consciousness. But consciousness is a force, and I believe it's the fundamental force in the universe.
Yeah, well, so the way that I kind of looked at things, I mean, I think that before I even had thought about, I even knew about idealism or panpsychism or any of these things, I kind of just was like, okay, this desk is really here, like, you know what I mean? Like, I can touch it, so it must be here. You're there. I'm not really thinking in the sense that, like, okay, even though in idealism you are really there, but you're kind of a part of consciousness, kind of, right, as opposed to you just being. I mean, the whole thing is kind of hard to wrap my head around to
It
begin with.
is. It's very hard to wrap your head around, but like think of it this way. There's plenty of stuff, physical stuff, materialist stuff in our universe that you can't perceive, right? I'm sure you've heard like cats have different vision than us and can see stuff that we can't see. That means that right here in my apartment, there's stuff present that I'm not conscious of. I can't see it, I can't measure it, but it is there, right? I mean, even think about germs, microscopic germs. They're real. Just because I can't see germs doesn't mean they're not real.
I mean, with something like germs, could you just kind of say it's because they're just so small you can't see them, or something like maybe whatever is in like the air here between me, like it's like more of like a gaseous type thing as opposed to like a rock solid, even though it is there. I still kind of think of it as like just something that's
Okay,
not
well, look, think
solid,
about
if
it
that
then.
makes
Yeah, no, I
sense.
hear you, man. Listen, and I'm not arguing with you because
No,
you're
I
right that most people, this is my views are certainly not mainstream views, at least not right today in the West. But um, what about dark matter and dark energy, right? Like, even according to our materialist
yeah.
scientists, they don't know what the vast majority of our universe is. Dark energy and dark matter make up the vast majority of our universe, but we don't know what that is, and we can't measure it. Well, we can measure it. That's the, or no, again, I'm not a scientist, but I think they can't measure it. They know it's there because they need it to be there for their science to work, right? For their formulas and their
Yeah.
way they believe the cosmos and the world actually works. if there is no dark matter and dark energy, it breaks their formula. So they've created these things to like fill in the blanks, right? Well,
Yeah.
why can't I just say, okay, well, maybe that's consciousness?
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely see what you're saying, and I'm more just asking questions than saying like, arguing with you. But if we can just start with the basics and like, well, first of all, I was thinking about this the other day, and it's like you obviously the hard problem of consciousness. No one really knows what it is, and it's like we're trying to grapple with it. But the most basic thing I think would be like why can't I just say, okay, like consciousness is something just like anything else that like basically evolved. Like at some point, I've heard that at some point there was like whatever the species was, one of the first species, it had some sort of sensor and it needed to get closer to the sun or away, just kind of like a flower does or whatever. And so at some point it was a very, very basic kind of just sense. It needed to get closer to heat or
That's
whatever.
possible.
And then from there, it just kind of evolved and evolved, just like the eyeball or whatever. It's like, how did we get the fucking eyeball? Who knows? How did we get why do we have the arm? Could have consciousness been this natural thing that just kind of evolved in order to basically help us survive, essentially, which is what it does. And why is it kind of the hard problem of consciousness? Why is it like so no one knows what it is? We can't even really talk about it. It is fun to talk about, but scientists can't, like you said, scientists can't
Well, my view,
they can't like control it, not control, but they can't study it. So it's kind of like I don't know if you know like Sean Carroll or something. I think do you know Sean Carroll, the physicist?
I don't
He
know.
like doesn't even like he's a materialist. He doesn't really even like to talk about consciousness because it's so just vague. And but anyways, why couldn't it just be this kind of evolving thing, just like the eyeball is? The eyeball is part of our consciousness, right? Obviously, because we see with it. So at some point, we just kind of naturally evolved an eye. We evolved a hand for touching. We evolved a nose for smelling,
It's
the
totally
ears for
possible. Yeah.
hearing, and that's basically all it is. There's nothing really special to it. It's just kind of something that we've evolved. Don't get me
Well, I
wrong.
would
I think
disagree
it's
with.
crazy, but I think it's interesting to talk about. But why is it so complicated to understand
I
as
mean,
opposed
what
to
you're
that?
saying is totally possible, right? And I don't
Yeah,
know, ultimately don't know the answer, right? What I would argue is that the reason we can't identify consciousness, we can't define it, we don't know what it is or how to measure it, is because of what I'm saying, because it's the fundamental substrate of everything. We can't you can't you need to have distance from something to be able to observe it, right? Like the sun can't feel its own rays of sun, right? Like, so because we are consciousness, we have no distance from consciousness to be able to objectively look at it. Now, again, that's just my belief. I can't prove that, but no one can prove the opposite either. Which again was why we go in these circles of the hard problem of consciousness.
but if we
I would
take
also
someone,
go ahead.
sorry to cut you off real quick. If we take somebody like you, like I take you as an example, and I just believe that you actually are conscious, which I do believe that. Yeah, I can't really study your brain or what you're thinking, but I can study your consciousness. I can also study like an animal, obviously, if whether or not an animal is conscious or not by if you not to be mean, but if you like hit an animal and it feels pain, I would assume that would be
No,
conscious.
I don't
That
know. No, is the ability to feel pain indicates consciousness?
I think
Sure.
so
A
because
slug can feel pain. A worm can feel pain. Does it
well,
have
and
consciousness?
in my mind there would be some sort of you obviously probably heard of the levels of consciousness where like when you get down to like a slug, it just barely it's almost like a sense. It's just like it it like it vaguely senses something, but it's like what it's like to be a slug. Like if you were a slug, what would it be like? It would probably just be very, very minimal. I'm assuming we don't know. Like you're right, but is that do you believe that could be correct? Like I mean, like when that's one thing that I disagree with when people say if you kick a dog and it gets hurt, I'm assuming, well, if you don't want to call it conscious, there's at least pain there, and so therefore, I would assume that it doesn't want to be hurt because it's running away or it's like squealing or whatever. And I would assume that would also be some sort of consciousness, what it's like to be the dog. It feels the pain. You know what I mean?
So physical pain is slightly different than the qualia, which is what they talk about with the hard problem of consciousness, right? Why does a sunset take your breath away, right? I know why if you kick me in the stomach, it hurts. So that is not a hard problem to solve. Like science can measure impact on me, on my physical body, and why that hurts me. But science cannot measure why looking at a beautiful sunset takes my breath away.
Well, I would say for one, I don't know if it does take my breath away, but for two, I mean, I'm just kidding. I see what you're saying,
Something,
but
you
for
know,
but
why
but
does
no, but I would
good?
just say that like there's some sort of emotion that we humans have evolved after consciousness. We got consciousness. We're much more, I would say, intelligent than say animals, and we're higher on the consciousness level. So at this point, we've evolved emotions. We've evolved the point to where I can love somebody and I feel that love, even though I feel like to a certain extent that is also it's not an illusion completely, but it's like love is just basically, essentially being horny and wanting to procreate or whatever. Same thing with a
Right.
sunset where it's like, oh, look at those beautiful colors. It's so magnificent, but is it really? Probably not. It just the
Well,
way.
so a couple things here. You in that last bit
And
there.
once again, sorry to cut you off, but I'm just asking questions. I'm really not like trying
Oh
to like
yeah, no, no,
disagree with
no.
you. You know what I
All
mean?
good, all good.
I'm not saying you're wrong or anything.
No, we're here. We're just
Yeah.
chatting. All good.
Yeah.
So but you did mention all in one kind of lumping these together: intelligence, emotion, and consciousness. To me, these are very, very different things, um, and different types of emotion, right? So being horny, that is an evolutionary necessity, right? That is what allows us to continue the human race, our drive to mate, etc. So that you can, in my mind, you can argue away to evolutionary factors, right? There's a reason why we feel horny. It's to make sure that we mate and continue the human race. That totally makes sense in evolutionary theory. Why does it feel? Why does you have that amazing experience looking at that sunset? I mean, I guess you could probably come up with some evolutionary excuse for that, right? Maybe like before modern civilization, like off the top of my head, I actually can't come up, but I'm sure there's
I
some
probably could. Some sort of grandeur in the, you know,
some
universe. When you go to like Yosemite and you see the big, the big walls or whatever, cliffs and mountains, it's just like this beautiful. Well, look at how amazing it is, type thing. Yeah,
does
but I
that
still I still see what you're saying, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with like the distinction between pain and a beautiful sunset because I still think that it's just emotions that we've evolved somehow through evolution. And I know that you're probably more right than I am because I've heard people, have the same arguments. They say the same thing as you do. I have the question. It's like, why isn't this just some sort of, yes, we do have consciousness, I think. I don't think it's totally an illusion, but we've gone to a point as humans to where we're so smart to where love is love. It's love isn't just to procreate. Like we really feel like love. You know what I mean? We really feel like the sunset is just amazing and it takes my breath away. When in reality, like you said, I don't really know what the evolutionary reasoning for that is. Can you think of any other ones though that would be good examples that of like that you can't really explain the evolutionary reason? Because I feel like with most stuff you probably could explain the evolutionary reason, right? Or am I wrong? Like any type of art, I'm assuming, right? Like
yeah,
listening
I
to
mean,
music or
the idea of awe, I think, is a hard one uh, to come up with a scientific reasoning around, right? Like other drives, like needing to eat and procreate and sleep and have a warm place to live, etc. Like that all, it's very clear what evolutionarily why we feel those drives. The idea of awe, whether it's to a piece of art or a sunset or even something beyond love, like love, right? Like, which is different than a sex drive. We don't like, why does love exist?
Yeah, I would assume that it's some sort of mating thing that obviously feels real.
Horniness and love are very different. Why? So okay, so love maybe so that the people then stay together so they can raise their children together or something like that.
Yeah, that's just what I would assume, but
Yeah, I could buy
I'm no
that.
expert. But I mean, yeah, like I said, I think, I'm definitely no expert, and when it sounds like I might be like disagreeing with you, it's more
So
like
no, no, no.
questioning. Yeah.
And I don't have the right answer. Right? No one knows the answers to these questions. But I think more so than like the hard problem of consciousness, what really brings me to some of these beliefs is that we can't explain. There's so much going on in the world that we can't explain through materialist, uh, non-dualist uh, worldview, right? So very well documented things like uh, people having traumatic brain injuries and then all of a sudden gaining some skill, like learning, knowing how to speak French out of, like, literally they got hit in the head and now they speak French. There's like not millions, dozens at least of examples of people having traumatic brain injuries and then gaining some skill that they have no business having. There's also an extraordinary amount of documented evidence that twins have uh, some connection that can't be explained by modern science or medicine, and that even and even mothers and their children, you hear, and not, there's, these are documented cases of a mother wakes up in one state and in the middle of the night, and it turns out that something was happening to their child thousands of miles away, and the mother somehow knew this in like, how does that stuff happen? And for me, it's going down that rabbit hole that eventually led me to the beliefs that I currently have.
Yeah, I mean, I would just assume, like, probably every other materialist assume, and the whole thing is too is I don't even really fully understand why you necessarily have, like, with a lot of this stuff, I don't necessarily know why it necessarily has to be a materialist versus idealist, because I kind of feel like, what if idealist things are happening in a material world, or material things are happening in an idealist world? I know that sounds kind of weird, but I guess that would have to be
Which
some sort
which
of.
came first? One, something has to be the chicken and something has to be the egg, right? Like, I do
Yeah,
think
well,
both is that there is definitely a material world, right? I am here, like I am a real person and I'm physical in the physical world, material. Um, but I believe that it under that is conscious is the non-material world, right? The idealist world. And I think you would believe the opposite, right? You know that there is a world of the mind, right? A mind, like, you believe consciousness exists. You're not saying there is no consciousness. So there definitely is both sides. It's a question of what comes first. Does the brain, did we evolve in a physical manner and then the brain has somehow gained the ability to create consciousness, or did consciousness come first and it has evolved the ability to manifest the physical world?
yeah, well, I think more what I was saying was I think that there could be, and this could potentially be dualism. I don't know, but like, let's just say I'm a materialist, but like I see a ghost or something. I don't really believe in ghosts. I don't really believe in paranormal phenomenon. I mean, obviously I believe other people when they say it, it just never happened to me, but let's just say I see a ghost or something and it's not really there. I would either say A, it's just my brain making it up, which I feel like that's probably what it is, or it potentially, if you want to get into the multi view that I'm stating, it would be, yeah, we're in a physical world. However, that ghost has somehow um maybe from a spiritual world, like, in like Christian religion or whatever, like, is has come to see me, or there's also a spiritual world out there. I feel like people get stuck where it's like it's either idealist or materialist when, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm in a physical world, but that ghost has come from another dimension to see me or something. But people don't tend to view it that way. They tend to be like, oh, the only way that could happen is if we're living in some sort of idealist world, as opposed to like in a material world, nothing weird can happen. But it's like I think that it
I
potentially
get what you're
could.
saying. Yeah. So we,
Also, what sorry, real quick, what you were saying earlier about the mother thing, or like, people have things where like they can supposedly know if somebody's, watching them or whatever, or like the dog thing where like a dog knows when his master is going to be home 5 minutes before. I would just say that I would assume that would either be chance, it's just chance, which I've heard people say this before. It's just chance luck, where it's just like, or you think your friend's going to call you on the phone and then they do. It's like that 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100 thing where it's, oh, it happened. You know what I mean? When reality it's just random chance. But
yeah. I mean, listen, again, I can't tell you you're wrong. I just believe the opposite, right?
yeah. Well,
It's,
like, once again, I'm not even necessarily saying you're wrong. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
saying what I've heard like scientists say or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like somebody like, you probably know who Sam Harris is, right?
yeah.
Like, this is like what I've heard Sam Harris say. Like, obviously I'm not the one who's like, but anyways, yeah. So I don't necessarily think you're wrong. I'm just saying that would be the alternative view, I guess, to what you're saying.
That's fair. And, at the end of the day, I can't prove my, no, as of right now, neither side can prove they're right. And that's
Yeah,
why we keep going around the circle. I will say, I do believe there's a chance, and in my mind, why there's so much chatter about this stuff recently, or one of the reasons at least, is that we are making these tremendous scientific breakthroughs, specifically in the quantum realm.
yeah,
Uh, and what I actually think is happening is that uh, AI is advancing to the point where it's starting to make scientific breakthroughs, right? And this is factual. That's actually happening. Uh, I know a lot of people are anti-AI, et cetera, et cetera. We'll put that conversation to the side for the moment, but there are like actual scientific breakthroughs that have come out of AI just in the last year or two. And I believe that over the next couple years, AI will allow us to kind of unlock the code on the quantum world. And in my view, once we unlock that will quote unquote prove the idealist worldview, and that is going to cause a grand reckoning, especially in the West, right? Because as we've already discussed, the 97% of people in the West believe in the materialist world. Um, but I think this is actually for the best. It's going to be a good thing in the long run because in my worldview, remember, I'm not just an idealist, I'm also a monist, I'm non-dualist. I believe there's only one thing, and it's consciousness. And that means me and you, Mika, are actually not strangers. We're two sides of the same coin. We are one. We are, and I don't want to be woo woo, whatever, but this idea of there, like oneness of the universe is, in my view, scientifically factual. And so me and you are, and so hopefully in my positive worldview, AI leads to quantum breakthroughs. Quantum breakthroughs lead to a new understanding of our universe, which allows us to know how interconnected we truly are, not just in the sense of like a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon, but in a much more tangible uh, and fundamental way. and then that is going to cause hopefully a real paradigm shift for the world where we stop being so win lose and start looking for some more win wins.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with you on that. I definitely disagree with the whole win. If you're talking about it the way I think you are, which is I'm trying to beat you, you're trying to beat me, as opposed to that, we're one and the same, and we should be able to help each other out, right? That's what
Yep.
essentially what you're saying with that. Yeah. So I mean, and then also with the quantum stuff, and even with what you were saying before, like it does make sense to me. Like it's the idealist view in the sense that like there is like even though I don't see something here, I can't touch something between us. There is something there. There is stuff out there we can't see. Also with the quantum stuff, how supposedly there's like kind of almost like nothing in an atom. So even though I can knock on this desk, it's essentially built up of a bunch of atoms and how they're kind of like floating around each other. So there's really kind of, in a sense, nothing there. It's just kind of like, um, it just kind of like forces or whatever, like, like kind of repelling my hand when I try and touch it. So that is very weird. That is a good point for you. And then also, I would almost assume this could potentially be leading more towards something like the simulation theory. And I feel like the simulation theory is very similar, more similar to the idea. I almost think the simulation theory and the idealist view could be the same because it could just all be a simulation, and the simulation is the consciousness. The
Yeah.
problem with the everything is consciousness theory is that we just have absolutely no idea. It's not even so much a problem because I don't think the simulation answers the question because we don't really know what the simulation is coming from, but we don't really know where the consciousness is coming from. Even if like I've heard kind of like Donald Hoffman say stuff like what happens when we die, and it's like we just kind of become consciousness. And it's like, well, what the hell is that? That doesn't sound great to me. Like I don't know if I really want to just be kind of like some sort of in like a conscious void. You know what I mean? Where it's like what he made it sound like you're just kind of drifting in consciousness, which is supposedly what meditation kind of leads to if you do it right.
Yep.
Um, One thing I wanted to go over just to kind of like is like the basics of the consciousness theories, because I feel like most people like myself when I first got into this didn't even know about these theories. When you hear about consciousness, you'd think about spiritualism or religion or woo woo or meditation, which all that is fine. Meditation and all that is great, but you don't really know about the different theories we have going on. So we have one: idealism, materialism, dualism, panpsychism. And if you could go over any, if you want, you can describe obviously your view on what idealism is, and then all of them. If we can kind of like define each one, and there may
Sure.
be some that I'm even missing too.
Yeah. So we'll have to work through this together. But I believe panpsychism is the belief that everything has some level of consciousness in it. So whether that's me and you or a rock, it has some level of consciousness. Uh, Idealism isn't saying is saying that it is actually made out of consciousness, right? That consciousness is the, like I've been saying, the fundamental force, the substrate, what everything else is made up of. Materialism again is, if we can't measure it, it doesn't exist. That we, yeah, basically we need to be able to measure things. If I can knock on it and it's solid, then it's real. If I can't knock on it then it's not real. Um,
But also, materialism would be everything is material, essentially, right? Like, um,
and that's how we're defining what is material. Something that's measurable is means it is material.
but
And
I mean, even gas or whatever that you can't see is measurable, right? So
right,
it's kind
and
of like,
so that's material, but that's included in the material world.
yeah. But I mean, yeah. I just when I hear materialism, I think of it as being kind of like I said, this desk is here as opposed. That's what's so hard. It's so hard to even define it, but it's here as opposed to in idealism. It's still there, but it's inside of consciousness. I think the best way that I would define it would be idealism versus materialism would be like if I have a dream and everything that happens in that dream isn't really there. It's all just a manifestation of my brain. That would be kind of like idealism. Everything inside of that dream would be idealism.
And yeah, and I
But
believe
then everything in the real world would actually be materialism in the sense that it's real, I guess. But
right.
yeah.
But all I'm
Okay.
saying is that in that latter part there, the way you define that is that it's measurable. If it's measurable, then it's quote unquote real. It's physical. Again, it doesn't have to, like gas is still measurable. It's not physical in a classical sense, but it's part of the physical world, right? Um,
But the only problem with that is like if the reverse of that would be idealism, then it's like what is nothing measurable because everything's just you know what I mean? Like if materialism is everything is has to be measurable, then idealism is it not measurable? You know what I mean? Like
Idealism is that that there are some things that are not measurable.
okay, and materialism everything is,
Yeah.
but then like you said, there's dark matter, gray matter that isn't measurable. So
Right, because they fish they you know they're a little loosey goosey with the facts because they need to do that to make their science work. I mean,
yeah,
that to me is one of the big red flags that there's a real problem with our science, which is that don't know more than we don't know what we don't know, and what we don't know is a lot grander than what we do know, right? And dark matter and dark energy is just the most blatant example of that. Um, so you mentioned the dreams, right? So basically, idealism calls for that our waking life right now, me and you chatting here, is basically like a dream.
yeah,
Uh, and that our lifetime is one big dream, a different type of dream, right? Waking dream. And then when you die, you like wake up to a different to like you were saying a disembodied consciousness, right? We leave this body, but we still have but we're still made of consciousness, right? So we're still plugged into this universal force, right? Remember, I was saying it's like gravity, right? So there's this force like called consciousness that can manifest in the physical, like me and you are right now, and that is our waking life. But then when we die, we don't actually, it doesn't just turn off. Our consciousness continues, our physical body is done.
and that's what you believe.
Yeah. And that's the basic idealist viewpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's the part where that is the part where I probably would have to like disagree, just because. I mean, it's not even that I disagree. It's just I just feel like we don't know, and it's like all we can really like, kind of going back to the materialism part. All we can really study is if you die, we can tell like the lights are off. There's no spirit that left the body that we can see, and I mean, I'm like once again, none of this can be proven or disproven, so you could be right, but I would have to probably say that it's probably over when, like, coming from this perspective, that it's probably over when we're done. But and it's like even if it isn't over, we haven't obviously you would agree we have absolutely no clue what happens after.
Well, so the counter argument there is near death experiences, right? And of course,
Yeah,
we can say that the mind, those are just um, something that's created by the mind, right? Like a hallucination, basically, right? Sure, that might be that might be true, but there's also a lot of anecdotal documentation of things that seem impossible, right? Or otherworldly, or however you want to describe it. But there's a long history of research into near death experiences that seem to hint at something more, and that it's not just the end.
Yeah, and that is hard to kind of discuss just because it's kind of like we'd have to see you'd have to present the facts or to show the what actually happened. And I believe you, and I've heard tons of stories about this type of stuff. So it could potentially be
So, I mean, that
true, but for some reason I kind of would just assume that okay, if this is really happening and it's happening like somewhat like regularly, I would just assume that like scientists would get in there and start studying this. Like why are they kind of avoiding
well,
studying this type of
there
thing?
is a lot of study going on to it. For a long time, it was it was not considered to be real science, right? If you were a scientist, if you were a hard scientist and you wanted to study this stuff, you were kind of ridiculed for that, right? Like similar to what's happened in the UFO communities or ghosts, like we don't study these things, or at least traditionally over the last couple generations, it wasn't socially acceptable to be a scientist and say, I believe in ghosts or I believe in reincarnation or life after death or UFOs, right? All of these things. I think that is slightly changing now, right? And as we're here talking about consciousness. Within the last year or two, there's been numerous congressional hearings where they're talking about UAPs, the new term for UFOs, and saying that we can communicate with them via telepathy and that they come from outside of space-time, right? We're no longer calling them that they come from some, distant planet. They're from outside of space-time. And this is according to congressional hearings, right? Um, so things are changing, and due to that, I think it is now becoming more acceptable for scientists to take this stuff seriously, right? So there's much more activity there. But even historically, are you familiar with the Monroe Institute?
Heard of it, but
So it's one of the leading consciousness research centers. It was this guy named Bob Monroe who, back in I think it was the 50s, started having unexplainable experiences. And this guy, he's not religious, he's not into drugs, he's not into anything woo woo whatsoever. He's a very buttoned up businessman. He worked in radio, uh, and he started having these inexplicable experiences. And at first he thought he was dying. He went to the doctor and like, am I dying, doc? And the doc was like, no. So then he went to psychiatrists and psychologists and were like, am I going crazy? Am I becoming schizophrenic? And they were like, no, there's nothing wrong with you, Bob, et cetera, et cetera. So this through his life experience led him to eventually creating the Monroe Institute to start a real scientific um, inquiry into consciousness, right? And his big kind of claim to fame is that he popularized binaural beats as a way to affect your states of consciousness. So I'm sure you've seen like on YouTube, there's all these flashing light videos, binaural beats. Ignore all that stuff. That's kids putting silly videos on YouTube. But there is a hard science piece here where the Monroe Institute, over many decades, studied how to use sound to influence your state of mind, your to put you into different brainwave states. So there's, and again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert here, but as you fall to sleep, as you going off to sleep, your brain cycles through a couple different levels of consciousness, or when you're meditating as well, or on drugs, or experiencing emotion, heightened emotions. These things all affect your brain waves and what brain state you're in. So what they did is over time they brought in people to like uh, expert meditators and other types of people who had high, control over their brain states, and they studied these people's minds while meditating or while performing their whatever, their specialty. And so um, they are now able to use binaural beats to take anyone and match you to the brain levels of like someone, an experienced meditator. I know I'm not doing a very good job explaining this, but basically they figured out what patterns of sound they have to play for your mind to put you into different altered brain states that are similar to the brain states you experience when you're falling asleep or when you're actually asleep, and or when you meditate, or when you're on drugs. I don't believe Monroe did much research into drugs, but it's a similar concept. And what they've been able to do now is they can manipulate your consciousness using sound, and they can cause people to purposely have these experiences similar to near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, the experience of remote telepathy. All of these kind of psi abilities are attainable through the manipulation of your brain states, aka consciousness, using binaural beats.
And so you believe in pretty much all this type of stuff. Well, it sounds like this obviously has been proven, but all the UAPs, obviously that's also come out. What about like remote viewing, or like I had some people on a while ago talked about I forgot what it's called, but like when you leave your body when you sleep and you can kind of like go and like
Astral
explore.
projecting.
Like
Yep.
so you pretty much believe in all this type of stuff that it is.
So I believe all of that is possible. I believe a lot of what you hear about all that stuff is nonsense, right? Like, just because something like telepathy is possible doesn't mean every time someone claims telepathy that is true, right? So I do believe in telepathy, but I believe there's also a lot of nonsense out there. I do believe that it is possible to astral project, but I also believe a lot of people on YouTube are claiming to astral project probably really aren't. But yes, at the end of the day, I think all of that is true. As far as the UAPs, I don't believe anything that comes out of Congress. That's a different story. But I think hypothetically, it is possible. I don't know what's going on with, there's always, you gotta, there's noise, there's disinformation, there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's hard to separate the facts and the truth from the noise. But I do think it is all possible. I mean, I've
Yeah.
experienced some of this stuff. I can give you binaural beats from the Monroe Institute. You can download their app. It's called I don't know. Just Google the Monroe Institute and get their app, um, and you can listen to binaural beats, and you can enter into altered brain states, and you can experience things that are not explainable. Now, you can
And
tell me that
you've done it.
yeah, yeah. You can tell me I'm having a hallucination, right? It's the same arguments as with out of body experiences, near death experiences. Maybe that's all being created by my brain. That is possible, but remote viewing works. I mean, the government, there's a long documented history of remote viewing in the US government. There's plenty of declassified government documents that say for like 50 years we were using and still are using things like remote viewing. I mean, have you heard of the movie Men Who Stare at Goats?
I've heard
um,
of it, but I haven't seen it.
it's a true story about a government program where they were trying to train military guys to be able to kill a goat or anything with their mind. um, so the CIA actually got wind of the Monroe Institute back in, I think, the 60s, and did a whole their own investigation into the Monroe Institute, and they've used many of Monroe's techniques to train their own people. There's also a declassified report by the CIA about the Monroe Institute that does not question whether any of this is true. It just starts with the assumption that it's all true and goes from there.
Okay, so with the binaural beats thing, basically just based off of the noise, you're able to do some crazy shit like
I mean,
hallucinate
it's the
or
same
whatever.
idea as like taking drugs, right? But instead of taking a drug, they're using a sound waves to manipulate your brain waves and bring you into altered states of consciousness. So the why I mean my the way my worldview works is if everything is made out of consciousness, uh, we're living in a 3D world, the space time world, right? You mentioned Donald Hoffman. He has this theory about kind of like that you can think of it like a video game console, right? Like, and the simulation, you mentioned the simulation
It
theory.
sounds his theory sounds exactly like the simulation theory to
They
me,
are
but for
very
whatever
similar.
reason, he's just leaving out the simulation theory, even though he's kind of bringing in the console and the GTA
Well,
5 or
I think
whatever.
part of it is because people use simulation theory in a broad sense that actually means different things to different people, and he's trying to be more specific than that.
Yeah.
Some people, I think, like Elon Musk, thinks we're in a simulation that is actually being controlled by like an individual or a thing, right? Whereas Donald Hoffman believes, and I believe, we're in a simulation that there's no one in control of it, right? It's controlled by a force, consciousness. Whereas,
And that force would kind of be God, right? Consciousness is God, right? Yeah.
sure, but again, not some guy sitting in the clouds.
Yeah.
Something more attuned to gravity. This fundamental force. So if we're living in a conscious based universe, and again, it's beyond space time, you need to be able to interact with the larger world. You need to somehow shut off your conscious mind and enter into an unconscious state. And people do this by using drugs, by using meditation, by using binaural beats. And then obviously sometimes it happens accidentally through injury or near death experience, et cetera, et cetera. Or just what was happening. Bob Monroe never really figured out why it happened to him. Like, he wasn't on drugs, he wasn't meditating, he wasn't doing anything. He just started having these crazy experiences.
Like what? It's like hallucinations and stuff, like he was seeing
Like
things or
out of body experience, astral projection, telepathy, downloads of information that he shouldn't have known, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
So in my worldview, uh, the fact that consciousness is the substrate makes all of this possible, right? And that you just need to be able to tap into it somehow. And my chosen method for that is using the Monroe Institute's binaural beats. And again, you can tell me that I'm just hallucinating, and I can't argue with that. It might just be that I'm hallucinating, but on one sense, it's relaxing to me. It's meditative. It's made me a happier, more it's improved my life in a significant way. So even if I am just deluding myself, and then I'm fine with that, right? But I do honestly believe, and again, it's because of these unexplainable things, like there's so much documented history of astral projection, near death experiences, telepathy, the things with the twins and the moms and all of that stuff that we just can't explain. But when you open your heart and your mind to this idea that maybe consciousness is the fundamental force of the universe, all of a sudden all of that stuff makes sense, and it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's why that works.
Yeah. So what are some of the crazy things that have happened to you while you're using the binaural beats? Is it mainly hallucinations? Is it you said out of body experiences, but do you have any stories of like specific things that you've seen, or have you talked to anybody or like anything
I
like
don't know. So
crazy like
everyone
that?
has so consciousness, whatever it is we're talking about here, I believe is beyond space and time, right? And so we don't have the language or the tools to talk about it or even interact with it because it doesn't speak English. It doesn't speak at all. It is this force, right? That's beyond space time. So when you try to interact with it, again, through meditation, through drugs, through binaural beats, through whatever, it needs to find a way to communicate with you, even though you're these are alien. It's an alien. Like we don't have a common method of communication. So it uses your brain to find a way to communicate with you. And this happens different for everybody. Some people get visions, some people hear auditory hallucinations, some people get downloads of information. It's very different and personalized. And again, this is based on your personal world experience, etc., because this isn't real. What's real is beyond space and time, and it doesn't it's not in words, it's not in language, right? So this is how it's being translated into something we can understand. And again, that could be auditory, that could be visual, that could be information based. It's different for everyone. For me, it's information based. I don't get visions, I don't hear voices, I don't communicate with other entities. I do sometimes all of a sudden, like a bolt of lightning, get a sense of knowing of some topic. And this happens, it could be something that's very insignificant, even sometimes, like, something about my life or whatever. And sometimes it's larger things, fitting pieces into place in a cosmic scale. But so I'm not, the most fun. The fun ones are the people who have like visions and like meet entities, right? And they travel, astral travel and stuff like that. And there's a million stories out there. You mentioned we met on Reddit, right? So you could go on Reddit. There's the first of all, the Monroe Institute is a very active Reddit subreddit. It's called the Gateway. The intro to the Monroe Institute is their like entry level program is called the Gateway Experience, and that's where you start. So there's a Reddit for that, but then there's Reddits for experiencers, for astral travel, for telepathy, for all of these things, and you'll see thousands and thousands of people who are claiming that this happens to them on a daily basis. We could say that they're all lying. We could say that they're all hallucinating. We can say that they're all crazy, but there's certainly no shortage of anecdotal evidence. It's not evidence, anecdotal stories for all of this stuff.
Well, the thing for me that it's surprising, it always kind of goes back to like why aren't the science? And I know that there are scientists who are studying it, like the Monroe Institute. And is the Monroe Institute legit? Like legit by like would I want to say Sean Carroll, but like you don't know who that is.
They
Like
work with like the University of Virginia is their official partner.
they're like a regular like a university basically. It's a legit university, not like
Yeah,
some
I mean, it's not a
off.
university; it's an institute. But yeah, it's considered above board and like they're not, it's not woo woo. And again, there's a CIA report on it where the CIA takes it very, very, very seriously. And again, the most shocking thing when you read the CIA report is that it doesn't, I would have expected that it was an investigation of, is this real, right? And that this report was going to be talking about, is the Monroe Institute, a bunch of quacks, or are they actually accessing something that we can't explain? But that is not what this document is. This document assumes from the start 100% this is real, the Monroe Institute is legit, and we're just going to explain to you how and why this works. And again, it comes down to the quantum world, yeah.
Like that's how they explain it. Everything's kind of from the quantum mechanics is kind of explaining it.
Yeah, it's beyond space time.
Yeah. So yeah, the main problem that I have with this, and it's like not once again, I'm not questioning you. I'm not questioning any of these. If there's thousands of people or whatever in these forums that are talking about their experiences, I'm sure some of them are true, some maybe not. I don't really know why you would go on Reddit to make it up, as that confuses me. It's like you're not even like really meeting these people. You're just,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really happen. For one, none of it happens to me. Yeah, I should probably, if I want it to, I should probably try by using the binaural beats, and that's a good way of doing it because I don't really want to use like DMT or ayahuasca or whatever. Have you ever used any of those drugs, those types of drugs to do
I have
this? Or
some limited experience, not recently, in the more distant past. I prefer a more controlled experience. So something like using the binaural beats, which does put me into an altered state of consciousness, but not so altered that I'm not able to glean insights from it, right? Like I think with drugs, it's you're so out of your mind that it's hard to glean insights from that. But with the Monroe Institute, you put on your headphones, I use an eye mask, and 5 minutes in, you're in a very, very deep meditative state. Like they compare it to like someone who's been meditating for 50 years and become a very, very good I don't know if good is the right word for a meditator, experienced meditator, using the binaural beats. An unexperienced person can drop into a very deep level of altered state, and you can try to experience some of this stuff from yourself. Yeah,
are you able to snap out of it like immediately?
yeah,
Like if
you turn off the beats, and you're back.
it's not like a drug where you got to deal with it for like like ayahuasca, you got to, you hear stories of people like shitting themselves or whatever, and that
No,
they can't
all
like
it
get
is
out of it for like a
all it
day or
is
whatever.
so all they're actually doing, you've heard like the right hemisphere, left hemisphere stuff. It's kind of an oversimplification of how our brains actually work. And more, it's definitely an oversimplification of how our brains work. But there is something to it where what they're acting, what a binaural beat is, all it's doing is playing a, two different tones in each of your ears, and your brain is trying to make sense of this. So what it does is, instead of hearing either of the individual tones, it hears the difference. Um, I'm not going to try to explain it much deeper than that because, again, I'm not an expert and I'll probably screw it up. And there's anyone that wants can look up a YouTube video and there's a 5 minute explanation of how binaural beats work. But there's no harm to you. There's no like hangover afterwards. And it's not affecting you in any negative way. It's just some beats, sound, audio, playing different beats in your two ears, and it synchronizes your brain in an interesting way. And there's numerous different states. I'm sure classical science has its own names for it, but the Monroe Institute just numbers them, right? There's the 10 state, the 12 state, the 15 state, the 21 state. And these are real brain states that you are in every night when you go to sleep, alpha, beta, et cetera, et cetera. But again, by using binaural beats, they can put you in these brain states while you're conscious and awake, and allow you to experience things that you otherwise would never be able to experience. I'm sure you've heard of lucid dreaming, right?
Yeah.
So lucid dreaming is a certain brain state, and uh, uh, the Monroe Institute can basically put you into a similar brain state. The goal with the Monroe Institute, though, is to not fall asleep. So it's similar to lucid dreaming, but you're actually still awake, which gives you autonomy.
Yeah. Um, so what about the drugs that you've done? Like what has anything happened? Do you have any stories from those? What drugs have you done to
I have done ayahuasca. I've done DMT. That was a long time ago. Um,
how was it?
both cases, they're very traditional, like exactly what you hear, the stories you hear. I mean, again, I don't get a lot of visual, and I've never like talked to entities. Actually on DMT. This is like 20 years ago or something, but more probably. Everyone sees entities on DMT, and the interesting thing is that people see very similar entities, which is what some people use as a explanation that they're real, right? Why are we all seeing the exact same hallucination? If it's not real, um, we would all see our own version of it, right? But yeah, and then on ayahuasca, I did a trip with ayahuasca and iboga, which is a similar. It's just another similar drug. I had like I went on a journey that through my personal history, my family history. Um, I didn't, yeah. Again, it was all very kind of classical, like how the stories you hear. And I don't know, nothing particular to I would pull mention that is any different than the generic stories you hear.
Yeah, I've heard things about DMT where like you're only high for like what 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, right?
Very
I've
quick.
actually heard it be called like the businessman drug or something, because like back in the 60s and the 50s they would take it on their lunch break, which is
I've actually heard that story myself. Yeah.
just seems crazy to me to take DMT on your lunch and then kind of like snap out of it. But I've heard that it'll send you almost into like another world for that five or
Oh,
ten minutes, but it
you
feels
are
like it lasts like for a while, even though it's only
you
5 or 10.
blast off to another universe entirely, more so than any other drug I've ever done. Like it is totally disassociative. Like you're no longer in this reality. You are somewhere else. And it happens like that, which is what's so crazy, right? People do mushrooms and acid and these things, but those like set in over a longer period of time and you kind of get higher and higher and your states of consciousness changes kind of slowly over time, hours, not. But with DMT, it's instant. Boom, you are somewhere else, and this it could last years, right? Generations. Like it feels like forever, but then you come out of it, and it's been 5 minutes. And it's profound.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, so I had one guy on who was, I mean, I think I would assume that he would be schizophrenic, but he called it like I forgot what he there was like a term he was using for what he was getting, which was like basically being um I'm forgetting what it was, but basically it was almost kind of like being attacked or something. But he was saying that he was hearing voices, but he was saying the voices were in him, but like not of him or whatever. So it was kind of like, and there was things that like they were. It was like he had done like I'm assuming that he had just done meth. He got schizophrenia, and that's just the end of the story. But he was saying that like he was hearing things that like he didn't even know about. But sometimes they'll say, "Oh well, the reason why the voices were saying that was because you had seen that or you had heard that." But he was saying they were talking about things that he had no clue of. Like it was like a separate entity. And then he also said he was seeing kind of like white domes or whatever in the sky, white orbs coming to him. And at this point, I kind of thought that he was just seeing things. It was visions. I was like, I asked him about it being a vision. He's like, no, it wasn't a vision. Like I saw these, and I was like, I mean, like I believe him, but at the same time, it's kind of like you got to like take out your phone and videotape it or whatever if it's happening. But then I also had a girl on who like literally was saying that like an alien had come and like taken over her body. And
I
so
mean,
obviously I don't
again,
really necessarily believe that one, but I mean it kind of gets to a point where like you don't really know what to believe. But I think the point is it's kind of like if this type of stuff is happening, and I believe this guy, you would think that they would do more research on it and be like, okay, something weird is happening here, as opposed to
I
kind
mean,
of
my
like
argument is that research is being done. It's just the mainstream scientific community is just ignoring it and like sticking their fingers in their ears and being like, nah, 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 this ain't happening.
that
Um,
just seems so
I
dumb. But
mean, again, like
I do
even
hear that
just
a lot.
even in this conversation, right? We've talked about the fact that congressional hearings are happening about telepathy with non-human, non, you know, things that come from beyond space and time, right? We've talked about uh, out of body experiences, near death experiences, telepathy. There is a volume of evidence, or I shouldn't say the word evidence, that's probably a bad word, documented anecdotal experiences by people that aren't on drugs that seem like respectable individuals who are reporting this stuff, right? Uh, and if you go on again on Reddit right now, go to the experiencers thread or the UFO threads, and you'll find thousands of people who are claiming all of this stuff is happening on a regular basis, that they're talking to orbs, that they're able to summons the orbs, that they're having interactions with entities of all biological entities. I've never had any of that stuff happen, but there's certainly a lot of activity and interest around this stuff. And I do think there is a bunch of science happening around this stuff. It is just not brought into the mainstream. I mean, I mentioned even the Monroe Institute is partnered with the University of Virginia. They're a very reputable, mainstream institution, and they take the Monroe Institute seriously. The CIA takes the Monroe Institute seriously. And this is what I was kind of getting at earlier. Like Carl Jung, Tesla, Huxley, all these people have been telling us for 100 years that we live in an idealist, monist world. But for some reason, we've all, and again, it might be what I was saying with the church. We can blame the church. I don't know. Blame the church for everything, right? I think mainstream Western society has just stuck their fingers in their ears and say, la, 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 we don't care. None of that's possible. But like you said at the very beginning, when we go into Eastern thought, this stuff isn't as foreign to them, right? In the Hindu culture, this is not strange at all. In Buddhism, in a lot of the Eastern traditions, all of this stuff is very it's been part of their culture for thousands of years. And that, again, is what Huxley's book, The Perennial Philosophy, is trying to point out, that across cultures, even in Western cultures, and I was saying, Jesus Christ, the kingdom of heaven is within you. That is more like a Eastern thought, right? That's more monist and idealist than what the church has become, and all Western religion has become very materialist.
So I was just going to ask that. So what I was going to say, what was the church when they didn't, if they didn't want idealism? So the church has pretty much, at least the Western church, has been pretty much materialist. And like if you tried to say, and so I wanted to ask you about if you tried to say that it was idealism at that point, they would potentially kill you or whatever, right? So you just had
Some
to
point
go
in the
along with
history,
whatever they were saying. But
that would be hearsay. Yeah.
at some point weren't they? So I wanted to ask you about dualism, and at some point the church was like there's Cartesian dualism, right? And
The church is
what's
currently dualist.
so they're not necessarily materialist; they're dualist, which is kind of like a mix of the two,
I
which
think
is
that
which is
I would call them both. Mainstream Christianity in the West is both materialist and dualist.
But that's what's weird is aren't those two separate things? Like you have materialists. Can you? I guess you could
Oh,
just be
yeah.
both. Well, I think that dualism is technically materialism. This is kind of like what I was saying before, where you can have both. I think it's kind of a mix of both, where it's like we're living in a material world, but then we have our spirit and the spiritual world. And I've heard I grew up Christian, so you hear about. I think that this is what they believe. Like I said, we live in a material world, but then there is the spiritual world, and the spiritual world can come and visit us. And so if you see a ghost or an angel or whatever, that could just be coming from the spiritual world. So I don't hear too much about dualism anymore, and it's probably just because most like no scientists are. But then I've heard that like there's Cartesian dualism, which came from do you know what I'm talking about? Cartesian
Not
dualism.
really, no.
I was just listening about this recently, and I'm forgetting the guy's name. It was like the French guy who came up with the guy who basically said I am or I know therefore I am or you know what I'm talking about that saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know his name, but yeah.
It's like bothering me because I literally just listened to a podcast on him. But anyway, so he even though he was a really smart guy and he came up with that saying and basically had this whole theory, on why on everything basically with consciousness. Um, he came up with Cartesian dualism because I guess at that time he was Christian. This was back in the 1700s. Um, but anyways, yeah. So in terms of just to get kind of down to the nitty gritty on idealism, and I asked this, the last time I had the guy on from Saudi Arabia and he was telling me about it, I really like just couldn't grapple with it. But I was like, so when I look at you or I look at the moon or whatever I'm looking at, you are essentially just inside of consciousness. And it's still kind of hard to grapple with understanding what like the best way that like I said, I think that the way that I would explain it is when I go to bed, if I have a dream and you're in my dream, that would be like how this is right now. But instead of it being in my mind in a dream, everything is kind of this consciousness. So the whole universe
Well,
is
so
basically this consciousness, and we're just like Donald Hoffman says, we're just kind of agents, conscious agents.
yeah,
I'm
so
still
if
not totally
everything
grappling with it. Like, so what would you be as opposed to material? Like, so materialism, I can just say, okay, you're made up of a bunch of atoms. We can pretty much quantify which atoms you're made up of. In idealism, what would you even say that you or I am? Just part of this collective
we're
conscious whole.
conscious, we're consciousness, we're pure consciousness. so so in my worldview, and I think Donald Hoffman would be similar, and Bernardo Kastrup, and a lot of these people, uh, Federico Fagin, um,
That
we
almost came out wrong.
almost it's Fagin is his name. So everything is consciousness, right? Think of it as this like primordial soup where there's just this force. I can't put it into words because it's beyond words. It's beyond space time. But it's the primordial soup of like think of like whatever existed before the Big Bang, even, right? Just I don't know. In our terms, it's easiest in my mind, at least. It's like a gaseous thing, right? It's like air or something, but it's not. It's a step. above that because air is within consciousness. But anyway, there's this primordial soup. And for us to be able to exist and live and function in this primordial soup, our brains have created like Hoffman uses the analogy like a video game console, right? Like we've created this simulation that this is how our brains are able to translate something that is beyond space and time into space and time, right? So I am actually here. I'm a thing, but I'm actually not a middle-aged white guy with a gray beard and a maroon T-shirt on. I'm primordial soup, right? And our
Like you is
brains.
almost just a metaphor for what you really are. Like you're just
I'm a avatar of my primordial, like my piece of consciousness, right? I'm a disembodied piece of consciousness that that our brains have created a simulation that allows us to function in the world and eat and sleep and reproduce, right? And that all happened through evolution. Uh, so I do think you are there. I don't. I think you exist, but I don't think you're again like a white guy with a black T-shirt on and headphones. I think you're pure consciousness, and my brain is translating you into this physical form so that I can function in the world.
yeah. See, like what I was saying before, and once again, all of this makes sense and doesn't make sense at the same time. So like I can't like say you're wrong, you can't say I'm wrong, but this kind of leads me to believe, and it's when I'm listening to Donald Hoffman, who I think is super interesting to listen to, although it seems like he's always saying the same thing. And like when I first heard him, I thought when he first came out, he was just saying what you see isn't really what you see, which is what he was saying. But like I thought he meant like if I'm looking at you right now, um, my eyes have just kind of evolved to see you a certain way because of evolution. It's not really the way that it is. But he like one thing that he said is like he'll say a lot where it's like it's 100% proven, like full stop or whatever, that this is the truth. And it's like he's never really explained to me how it's been mathematically proven. It's kind of just seems like his viewpoint. And
Yeah.
I don't think that it is has been proven, but I think that he is very interesting. But when he's talking about it, it makes sense to me more as just being inside the simulation. And it's like you said, Elon Musk and a lot of these other guys. And I don't know if you know of Nick Bostrom's. He came out with the simulation theory, which is basically like if we as a civilization get to a point where we're creating civilizations, and this can probably lead into like the AI that you want to talk about. If we're building simulations, which we're starting to. I mean, like I literally just right before I'm really into like creating images and AI videos, and that's becoming more and more like they literally have world building machines at this point where you can create your own world and walk around, and that's what it seems like we're headed towards, which I think is what you were talking about. If we get to that point in 100 years, 1,000, who knows, 100 maybe sooner, but 100 years, 1,000 years, we're going to be able to create simulations, and we are going to create simulations. So there's just going to be simulations upon simulations upon simulations. So it only makes sense that we are in a simulation as opposed to base reality. Supposedly, he thinks there is a base reality, but there's probably only one. Who knows? There could be multiple base realities. But eventually, in that base reality, the civilization will get to the point, and there's like three reasons why they wouldn't do that. It's like they either destroy themselves before they think it's unethical to create a simulation with conscious beings, or something else. I don't know if you already know this, but for the
No,
audience,
no. Uh,
so basically in 100 whatever time it takes, we're
I
going to
think it's
create
a
something
lot
conscious.
quicker than 100. I think
Yeah.
in our lifetime.
So that to me kind of makes more sense. And it's like if I'm looking at just like when I'm on my computer and I'm playing a game or whatever, I'm not really seeing the game. There's like code and whatever else behind the game that I have no clue what it is. If I was looking at that, I wouldn't understand it. That kind of makes the most sense to me for the idealism thing. The problem that I kind of have with the idealism thing, and I suppose you could say the same thing about the materialism thing, is like where did it all come from to begin with? Why is it even there to begin with? And I mean, obviously, you probably have no. I mean, you can't answer that question.
I
Nobody
mean, we're all
can. But
grappling. This is why these are unanswered questions, right? Because we don't know what caused the Big Bang. We don't know what was before the Big Bang. We don't know if idealism is real or materialism. Like we don't have the answers. Um, to some extent, I think it's because what I was saying earlier. You can't. If we are consciousness, we have no separation from consciousness, so we don't have an objective view of it, right? It's hard to view something when you're in the middle of it, or even harder when you are it itself. So um but yeah, everything you just explained is how I see it. I think within our lifetime, um as I was saying before, AI is going to rapidly begin creating scientific breakthroughs. And I believe one of those scientific breakthroughs will be kind of cracking the quantum code. We've already started, and again, I'm not a scientist. You'd have to look up the details of this. But in the last couple of years, they have documented evidence of things outside of space time, which is really a mind-bending idea of, but also proves that there is something outside of space-time. So that basically means that mainstream science in the West is wrong. It doesn't mean that idealism is right, but it means that we have a lot of wrong misinformation in our science in the West right now. So quantum quantum breakthroughs are happening. We've seen evidence of stuff outside of space time. I think in
what
the
would that even mean, though? Stuff outside of space time, like. I mean, the easiest way to explain it be like if we are in a simulation, the stuff outside of the simulation would be stuff out of space time.
yeah.
Yeah. But how would you explain it on an idealist level? Like just because everything inside of consciousness is in space time, and then what would
I
be out?
believe that our space time, in the same way that like you have planets and then that make up galaxies that make up universes, I believe there's space time, like our bubble, everything we know as reality is space time, but that there's other lots more out there that all operates on consciousness as the fundamental force, and that by using things like the Gateway Experience, the Monroe Institute's Gateway Experience, or drugs or meditation, that you can access these other realms. And that science will soon actually be able to explain this to us. And when they can, it will cause hopefully a paradigm shift for the better.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having to charge my
No worries.
phone. So you cut off there at the end though.
Um,
Basically AI will
AI
solve
leads
this.
to quantum breakthroughs. Quantum breakthroughs leads to a new understanding of how the universe, both our universe and what I consider the extended, the beyond space-time universe, actually works, and that will create a paradigm shift for all of us, where we move towards a mainstream belief in idealism, and hopefully monism, which then leads us to a profound shift in humanity, right? If we all, if we were saying earlier, if we truly all believe we are part of a whole, then we would start acting like part of a whole, and instead of enemies, right? We would collaboration and the you know, the human spirit. We could all come together and sing kumbaya.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like, couldn't you just say, like, maybe even if we are, even if it is idealism and we are all in consciousness, we're not necessarily one and the same. Like, it's like, why does it necessarily mean that we are one? I mean, I kind of see how it makes sense, but it's
Well,
like,
it's monism, right? Like I believe there's only consciousness. Everything else is what the Hindus would call Maya, an illusion. Everything, and like you were saying, a dream, right? Like it's like a dream. Uh, the only thing that's real is consciousness. Everything else is an illusion or a dream or whatever you want to describe it.
yeah. And then in your the chat GPT post that you sent me, that explains you well, it said something about we kind of like live in a non-linear um dream type situation. Do you believe, what do you mean by non-linear? Does that mean kind of like,
Well, outside of space time, there is no time, right? So linear implies time. Once you leave space time, there is no time. Uh, so if you any of these traditions, whether you're talking about Donald Hoffman and Bernardo Kastrup and the more recent kind of scientific bend on this stuff, or if you're talking about Advaita Vedanta, which is the Hindu philosophy school of thought that's thousands of years old. Um, in both of these cases, uh, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm saying what I want to be saying. Sorry, can you ask your question again?
yeah, well, I mean, I guess the question was that you put that we're living in like a non-linear.
Oh, right. So in both
Yeah.
of these cases, time doesn't exist. Uh, Everything, and by the way, in creation myths of Christianity, time doesn't exist either, right? Like God created the world, everything was created all at once.
But do you think there's anything to that? Like, do you think there's any connection? Like, do you think they knew more back then
Yeah,
about
yes, I do. I
how
think
how so though?
so. When you leave space and time is an illusion. There is no such thing as time outside of our space time. Time is something that our brain, a construct of our brain, again, to help us survive in this universe, right? So, according to all these schools of thought, Bernardo Kastrup and them in modern day, Advaita Vedanta and other historical schools of thought, all would tell you that all of history, everything that's ever happened and everything that's ever going to happen, is all like on a pin, the head of a pin needle. It's all now. There's just
So you believe it's all predetermined, or
no. So this is gets into a little complicated, but all of these same schools of thought will tell you everything that's potentially going to happen, all potentialities exist. So
like in the multiple worlds theory of quantum mechanics?
yes, so every possible like when this when this call is over, I'm going to drop dead. I'm also going to go out to dinner. I'm also going to go get run over by a car. I'm also going to fall in love tonight. Like all of these things, all are are possibilities that all exist in this state of possibility. Where free will comes in is that I do have control over which of those potentialities I'm going to actually experience in space and time. but they all exist. But I can only, my human linear brain can only choose one path.
But I mean, what is you if you go into separate paths? Like if one path you go this way, one path you go that way, what even is you? Like
pure consciousness.
But I mean, if you go right and one goes left, would it be you that goes? It wouldn't be you that goes both ways.
So they only exist as possibilities, right? In space-time, I'm going to have to choose one path. When this Zoom is over, one of those things is actually going to happen. I'm going to go out to dinner. I'm going to get run over by a car, but I can't do two of them, right? I can't have two different futures. I can only have.
Didn't you say they all happen though?
They all exist in a state of possibility, probability.
But they don't all happen.
Not in space-time.
In somewhere else outside of space-time, do they?
I don't know.
And with that, yeah. Yeah, I had one guy on, we talked about metaphysics, and I thought he seemed to, yeah, he was kind of out there, but he was interesting and he was smart, but he believes in idealism, and I asked him kind of why, and he's like, well, if the universe is infinite, which we kind of think it is, or even if it's not infinite, it's massive. He was kind of saying that I think I'm thinking of this because of what makes you, but if you traveled and you just kept traveling, eventually you would hit another you because it's infinite. And so if you hit for whatever reason, it's hard to explain what he was trying to say, but you'll eventually run into another version of you because it's infinity. Then that makes him think that the whole thing is kind of consciousness as opposed, because it's I guess just because how could it be so massive? I don't know. But if you also, I don't know. I thought his reasoning on it was interesting, but then also if you do run into another version of you, is the consciousness still you? And this kind of just made me think of it because you said because the many worlds theory is when it's so complicated, but when the quantum world, I forgot the word is, when the wave
collapse.
When the wave function collapses, it supposedly goes into multiple different worlds.
Well, so the idea here is that,
so does that mean there's multiple
until something is observed, right, that things can exist in numerous states at once, right? The famous double slit experiment, Schrodinger. By the way, Schrodinger also monist, idealist. But yeah, double split. So until something is observed, and this is scientifically proven on the subatomic level, like molecular level, until something is observed, it can exist in more than one state at once. And then, you also talk about the cat, Schrodinger's cat, right? The cat is both alive and dead until someone opens the box and observes it. This is the same idea of me saying, until this Zoom ends, and then I figure out what's going to happen tonight, right? Maybe I drop dead, maybe I go out for dinner, maybe something else happens. So right now, all of those things exist in a state of probability. If the equivalent is I'm the cat, I'm currently in the box. I'm both alive and dead. So and to my example for tonight is I'm currently both going out to dinner and getting run over by a car tonight. But until I observe, that's when wave function collapse happens and a singular probability becomes reality. So yes, so it is the many worlds theory. There's literally, I'm saying going out to dinner and getting run over by a car, but there's an infinite number of things that could happen to me tonight. And in my view of the world, all of those things actually are happening they don't happen in space-time, they happen in a state of probability. And then within space-time, my free will and what I experienced tonight and my observational powers is going to collapse that wave into one reality. And that is the reality I will experience this evening.
But I mean, that doesn't actually necessarily happen on a macro scale, right? Because I've always been confused by the Schrodinger cat, because it's like, obviously that's not actually happening. Like if you put a cat in a box and do the thing,
sure,
it's not actually dying in one, because it never dies. It's like the cat's always.
Is the cat even in the box if you're not looking at it? Does a
Well,
tree
yeah,
fall in the wood? If a tree falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is no.
well, see, I think it does. I think it
Okay, so what
does.
sound? This is hard science. Sound is a vibration that happens in our ear. If there's no ear in the woods to hear it, either human or animal, if there is no ear, there is no sound. So if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, it did not make a sound. And that is scientific
Well, you
fact.
can say it didn't make a sound, but it made the vibrational waves
Okay.
that could have been heard by a sound of some by someone.
Probability. Could have. That's a
Well, no,
probability.
it would have. Like, I mean, I'm just assuming that if the tree falls, I mean, if the tree falls, it would send a vibration, and just no one would be there to hear it. But if so, then nobody would hear it. You can say there's no sound, but there still is the vibrations. I think the big question is does it happen at all? Like, do you believe that there are even
If
woods
I
out there
when I
right
turn my
now?
back, I don't think there's anything behind me.
See, that's where I disagree with you, because, and this is where it gets like interesting, because it's like, I feel like, speaking of the non-linear world, I feel like we obviously are living in a linear world, and you could say that that's only because we've evolved that, and we've evolved, but it's like, how are we evolving to see everything the exact same way? Like, you can say you don't believe the walls behind you, right? You think it's kind of like a video game, or when you turn it all, I think the term is decoherence, right, or whatever, where like everything, or like in a video game, if
I'm
it freezes,
rendering the universe. My brain
rendering.
is rendering the universe in real time, the
But
same way that in a video game, if you go into a different room, the room you used to be in is gone, right? They don't render all the rooms. They only render the room you're currently in and experiencing, which again is like a wave function collapse. The probability is there's lots of rooms, lots of worlds, but you're only experiencing one of them, the the one you're observing.
like, how come? So you right now you don't believe the walls behind you. You think it's, but like when I'm looking at it, I can tell you it is behind you. It's
I mean,
white.
I can see it in my Zoom screen, so I know it's there right now. But if no one was looking at it, the point is, if no one was looking at it, it wouldn't be
Well,
there. The
so
same
that's my
as
point.
if
Let's
no
just,
one is in the woods to hear the tree fall, then it doesn't fall. So if no one is observing that wall back there, then that wall doesn't exist.
but how does that work though? Like, how is everything so? That seems like there must be some sort of simulator creating the worlds as you
That's
go.
our brain. Yeah, our brain is the simulator. Our
But
brain
how
is
come our brains
taking
are constantly like agreeing with each other? Would you say it's because we're one and the same, basically?
as I'm honest, yeah.
It
I
just seems so
think
weird to me. But with the quantum question is, doesn't that the quantum stuff only happen in a quantum state? It's not happening at the macro level, right?
correct.
So it's like, if it's only happening at the quantum level, that
But
wall still
the
is behind
macro
you.
world is made up of the quantum world.
Yeah, but I um
We don't have we're now getting, this is the problem, right? Like, why
This is like beyond our.
well, no, it's the big struggle of modern science is, why does what happened in our classical universe not line up with the quantum universe? And it's what has broken science, right? It's why we don't have a theory of everything.
And that's like the quantum gravity thing, right? That they're trying to figure out, like how to figure out the theory of everything.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't, like I said earlier, we don't know what we don't know, and what we don't know is a lot more voluminous than what we do know. But in the classic human way, we think we know it all.
Yeah, but I mean, like, um, I lost my train of thought. It's
It's
just, oh yeah, let's just say you put like a video, like neither of us are here. I put a video, or you put a video camera there.
That's an observation.
But that's the whole thing, is how does it know that it's like an observation? And like if you're like what constitutes an observation? You know what I mean? Like,
So I believe there has been studies like that. And I think what happens is, it's when someone watches the video that it collapses.
so it has to be an observation by a human or an animal, any type of animal, you think? Or
No, so again, I wish I was smarter than I am, but there has been experiments where uh, they use like some kind of digital measuring device that is non-human, and it still collapses the wave function. Um, I can't speak with any kind of true knowledge on it, but I believe those studies have been done.
this is what's confused me, is was like when I first started learning about quantum mechanics, which both quantum mechanics and consciousness is totally fascinated me. But when I first started learning about it, I asked that exact question: how does it know it's being watched or recorded or whatever? And it seems like I haven't really been able to find out like the answer to that. So it's like, but then I've heard like it's really complicated, but I've heard that it's like in a macroscopic world, like in your room there or whatever, it's almost like everything is interacting with each other. So it's not just me looking at you or you looking at the room. Um, Everything is constantly kind of interacting with each other. And when it does that, it's decoherence or whatever. So it's like you naturally become one whole object, as opposed to massive smaller particles that are in a superposition, if that makes sense. And I've heard that's all based on kind of like this is way outside of my like expertise, but it's like it happens all because of like probability and like math and statistics. Was like whether it's in one position or another, it all kind of evens out to make you. So it's like, if that makes sense, like so basically you're constantly being, I don't think it's necessarily the person, it's just you're constantly being is it recorded, or what's the word, measured or whatever.
Observed, yeah.
You're kind of constantly being observed as you're constantly interacting with your environment. But I don't know, man. Like I mean, honestly, I've been trying to figure this shit out for a while, and it's hard to get the answers to the quantum stuff, because you really have to be like a scientist to know that. You know what I mean?
Well, also that they don't really know, like, some of this is known, but a lot of it is just unknown,
Yeah.
and that's how we came to this part of the conversation, right? I believe that in our lifetime, AI will explain a lot of this to us. And that is going to, one way or the other, whether I'm right about some of this stuff or if I'm totally wrong, one way or the other, I think we're going to start getting some answers, which is super exciting. Um, it would be, amazing that in our lifetime, if we even if they could just crack a theory of everything, right? If they could line up the classical world with the quantum world, that would be paradigm shifting for everyone. maybe not kumbaya and we're all like world peace and all of that, but certainly paradigm shifting.
Yeah, it's going to be really crazy with the AI. And then, can I use the bathroom?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Hold on one second.
Are you?
All right. Hey, we're back. So we're just going to cover the AI stuff real quick. And then, so yeah, with the consciousness stuff and AI, I've talked to a few other people and it sounds like I want to do the same thing, or you want it to happen, where you kind of almost think that consciousness is going to like solve the world's, like the two other guys I talked to, or two other guys I've talked to, had theories on why consciousness was kind of like,
It's our
their
only
theory
hope.
was why it's going to like solve the world's problems, but you think it's just going to happen naturally
I think
with.
it's our only hope. So I think, you know, AI is changing the world rapidly, right? In a couple major ways, right? It's redefining work. It is already causing massive job losses. I know this because I'm causing some of those job losses. My companies are automating away jobs, real human jobs, really shitty human jobs, excuse my language. And that's why I'm totally okay with that, because I don't want my fellow humans doing data entry. Like, I think that that we're meant for something better than data entry. So if I can teach a computer to do your data entry for you, then great. But but that's going to cause a real issue, because we as humans find value through our work, right? I'm sure you've heard this argument that the big problem with mass job loss, above and beyond, even if we could like figure out how to give everybody some type of universal basic income or something like that, so we're not worried on a financial level, we're still going to be there's going to be a crisis of meaning. Like, how do we find meaning in a world where we have no purpose, right? Like, our work.
I kind of disagree with that standpoint, but I know it is a valid one. Yeah, obviously.
And then on the other hand, you also have the possibility that bad actors could use AI to do bad things, right? I mean, even already in Ukraine and in war zones right now, they're using drones and AI to kill each other, right? And so imagine, as this continues to ramp up, the possibility of the damage that a bad actor could use AI to do something bad, right? So these are two ways that AI could lead to very dark futures, right? Either we all lose our jobs and we're all sitting around with nothing to do and no meaning in our lives, or some bad actor literally uses AI to kill us all. The only thing stopping either of those things, in my mind, from happening is a paradigm shift where we stop acting so materialistic and so all every man for themselves, and we start existing in a more collaborative, communal way. If we don't do that, I believe that AI could really seriously harm us all. So, in my view, we only have two options: either the dystopian future that a lot of people think is where we're headed because of AI and robotics, or we have a paradigm shift where we realize that there is something larger than ourselves, and in my view that is called consciousness. Some people would call it God. And that paradigm shift leads us to, again, working collaborative, community, win-win kind of future. And otherwise, it's just a really ugly dystopian timeline that we're going to be coming up against.
Yeah, sadly, I just don't know if that's gonna be the thing that fixes it, because I don't know if the whole world is gonna come together and be like, okay, because consciousness is idealism, because idealism is true, we're all just gonna be. I just don't know if that's
I mean,
gonna
that's
work.
certainly not going to happen overnight, right? And there's going to there even if like the Western scientific community came out tomorrow and was like, "Hey, we now think like we made some quantum breakthrough. We now understand how it all works. And guess what? We live in an idealist, non-dualist universe." Even if that happens tomorrow, the vast majority of the world would not accept it, at least anytime soon, right?
Well, not only that, yeah, well, exactly that.
There'd
They
be
wouldn't
huge
accept it, or
there'd
yeah,
be religious pushback. The church isn't going to just
yeah,
lay down and be like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then, there'd be huge pushback, probably even wars fought over this. We might have religious wars coming. I mean, we have religious wars right now. Most wars historically have been religious wars, right?
yeah.
So I don't think it would happen overnight, but I do think that over time, the mainstream view would shift. And by the way, again, I think the mainstream view in the East has already shifted. It never needed to, it doesn't need to shift because they've always believed in this stuff for
Well,
thousands of
parts.
years.
I mean, for one, I mean, I hate to be like, I hate to disagree, but it's like, I mean, for one, parts of the middle or parts of the East, but then what about if the East has already figured this out? Then how come they're not?
Well, because it's not even there. Like, so, I mean, in China these days, most people are secular, right? They don't believe in anything. I think for the most part in India too, like the average person in India isn't necessarily a devout follower of Hinduism, and certainly not of Advaita Vedanta, which is the school of Hindu philosophy that I prescribe to. So while these concepts are more discussed and accepted in the East, it's not like the average person in the East actually prescribes to these things. They've become westernized. I mean, that's what most of China is Christian, right? Like they've been
Are
infected by
they?
the West.
Are they?
Oh yeah, there's Christianity is massive in China. Yeah. I mean, there's Buddhists too, but it's not like the most people in China are Buddhists. That's not true.
Yeah, that's interesting because it almost seems. I mean, because it almost seems doesn't China like intentionally try to like keep our ideology like out of their whole country? Like they try and almost like protect their country from even like hearing what we have to say.
To an extent, but I mean, they've certainly become very westernized, certainly
Yeah,
say over the last 20 or 30 years, right? They've let,
yeah.
pop music, there's pop music, they watch American basketball, like it's become very westernized. Now there is censorship to a great, so they don't allow in any talk of homosexuality and that kind of stuff. But
Is that like illegal in China, homosexuality?
I don't know if it's illegal, but the state is very homophobic. The state itself.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's illegal. I'm not sure. Certainly in Saudi Arabia and a lot of Muslim countries, it's actually illegal.
It's weird how that became such a big thing for their religion and countries was like, I mean, I'm sure there's other stuff too, but it's like it seems like they're really just they're really homophobic over there, you know? It's just
Yeah, I mean, it's not just homophobic though. It's also like they feel like we're promiscuous sexual, like
yeah.
even heterosexual, like the promiscuity of the West. But again, they've become very westernized, right? Like they all have iPhones. Like the average citizen in China like knows that there's a world beyond China, right? It's only in maybe North Korea. That they're like truly cut off from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But
That's
so
a crazy nation.
to take it back to what we were talking about, the
Yeah.
reason that the average person in the West doesn't I mean, in the East, sorry, doesn't necessarily already currently believe in a monist and idealist world is because they become westernized. But it's at least always been part of the culture. So it's not so like in America, when you say these things, it's like, that's crazy. You're way out of the mainstream, right? I think in the East, it's not that everyone truly believes this stuff, but suggesting it isn't craziness because it's been part of their culture for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So it's just a lot more normalized. It might not be fully accepted by the average person, again, because they become so westernized. Um, but it's certainly more established and not considered so far out of the mainstream like it is here.
Yeah, and it seems like more, especially in, you kind of mentioned India not being so, but India, like, well, at least their religions, like Buddhism and the other one,
Hindu.
but Hindu. You're kind of like Hindu, then you believe in.
I mean, so I discovered Advaita Vedanta. So first of all, Hinduism is not one religion. There's like lots of religions inside of Hinduism. It's more really a philosophy than how we consider religion. But I found Advaita Vedanta after I believed all these things. So I developed my worldview, including idealism and monism. And then I discovered that there's this ancient Hindu philosophy that is describing the exact same worldview that I already prescribed to. And so that was exciting. It was like, whoa, so this is what I believe, and I've discovered through my experiences with drugs and the gateway experience, but also my research into modern day people like Donald Hoffman and Kastrup, as well as historically with Schrodinger and Tesla and Huxley and Jung and Plato, even, to then discover that this also lines up with the oldest philosophy from Hinduism is pretty impactful, right? And then also Kabbalism, which is Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, is very, very, very similar too. And again, they're in my mind, they're all the same. This is Huxley's The Perennial Philosophy, which states that at the end of the day, all of these world religions, especially the more mystical ones, are all saying the exact same thing. So whether it's mystical Christianity, mystical Judaism, which is called Kabbalah, whether it's Advaita Vedanta, which is Hinduism, whether we're talking about Buddhism, all of these traditions are basically saying the same thing, which is that we live in a monist, idealist world. And to me, it is pretty profound that I came to these understandings on my own and then realized that these ancient traditions are saying the exact same thing.
But it is counterintuitive to you, right? Like when you walk around, you obviously,
Oh
it
yeah,
just naturally feels like everything is quote unquote material,
of
and like
course.
you don't like view things as kind of like you're living inside of consciousness. It's just, so you almost had to like reframe you have to almost reframe.
I
But for
think we all
that's
need
what's
to
weird is
reframe.
the guy from Saudi Arabia that I was talking to, he said that to him intuitively it's consciousness, but like for whatever reason here it's not intuitive to me. I mean, obviously even
Again,
materialism
so it's you've been indoctrinated into the West from the day you were born, right?
yeah.
And I mean, when you're kids believe like I at least a lot of kids and me, like I had weird experiences as a kid that as an adult I can't explain, right? Like,
Like
um,
what?
uh,
Spiritual stuff or
yeah, like altered brain states. Like I sometimes even just like daydreaming, but you'd have these experiences that seemed so real that it was almost like waking dreaming, like lucid dreaming when you're awake. And, you know, a lot of kids report telepathy and experiences like talking to entities and stuff. And then as we get older, we're told, no, you were just like dreaming, or you were, you know, you were just a kid imagining something that wasn't real. But maybe it was real. And it was just our culture and our indoctrination over time that told us it wasn't real.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard recently, there's a podcast. I didn't listen to it, so I don't really know the details, but there was a podcast that came out that said that kids, I think it was like a group of kids with like hearing disabilities.
You're talking about the telepathy tapes. They're autistic
Yeah.
kids.
And
So
I've recently heard that it was supposedly, who knows, you know what I mean, debunked, that there was some.
there's been no debunk. I mean, so like people that don't want to believe these things are always going to say it's been debunked, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you don't want to believe, you don't have to believe, right? And to some extent, and this kills materialists, but you need to believe in order to believe, right? There's like a mental jump that has to happen where you have to accept these things. If you don't believe telepathy exists, then you're not going to experience telepathy.
Have you experienced it, or?
Sure. Have you never, like, I mean, again, you can always say that was just a coincidence, but have you never, like, pulled out your phone to call your fiance and she's already calling you?
I mean, honestly, not that type of stuff doesn't really happen that often to me.
Okay, but you
I'm
know
not
that
saying that I
these things
never.
do happen to people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not only that, but it's obviously it's happened to me. But I think that I probably am just like, oh, that was just by chance. But who
Right.
knows?
So it
Yeah.
probably actually happens a lot more than you think it happens, but because you don't believe, you don't notice when it happens because you're not consciously looking for those experiences, right? Because I believe in this stuff, am more keyed into it. So I'm looking for these things. And so they happen all the time. And, you know, you'll hear people say they like see numbers, you know, 1111 and stuff like that. They see signs. They get
That's kind of like pattern recognition types. I mean, I don't know, but
maybe, right. But, or maybe you're just trying to explain these things away.
but why would it even be like the telepathy thing? If let's just say I go to call my fiance and then she's already called me, why would that even be like a thing? Like, why would that even like we're just kind of in sync or something? Like
Yeah. Your telepathy,
we're not
telepathically
really like
linked.
communicate. I actually kind of mean like communicating like
Yeah,
via
but the
words.
thing with the phone is just like the beginning level of that. You are communicating. You're communicating. I need to talk to my fiance, and she heard you think that. So before you even picked up the phone, she heard your brain waves, and she picked up the phone to call you, and that's just the first level. But if you multiplied that by multiples, you could be communicating with her on a deeper level, not just, you know, I want to talk to you, but like actually having a conversation. And that's what these autistic kids are doing. So the telepathy tapes came out.
Or was it autistic kids? So it wasn't like deaf kids, it was autistic kids.
They're autistic kids. Although there are also in the telepathy tapes examples of non-autistic people that have similar experiences, or a lot of the telepathy in the telepathy tape is happening between a non-autistic parent and an autistic child. And they're currently shooting a movie to accompany that podcast, and they claim, and I can't verify this, but the movie will be out sometime in the next year or so, so we'll all get to watch. They claim they've filmed unmistakable cases of telepathy, and that they've removed all the variables. You know, there's all kinds of, oh, they were secretly signaling, or, you know, whatever. they've done this in a very controlled scientific way so that there was no, funny business, and that they've documented unmistakable telepathy. So we'll see what happens with that.
Do you think there, I mean, I don't think so, but do you think there could be a potential for evolution for that type of thing where these particular autistic kids have kind of just learned to do that through evolution because they can't communicate? Or I mean, I think it's physically, might be physically impossible, right? But
Well,
do you
I
think
don't
it
know.
could just be an
If it's,
evolutionary type
yeah, I
thing?
definitely think it's in the same way that, like, when you have a traumatic brain injury, sometimes you gain other abilities, right? Like, people all of a sudden who weren't musical are now playing classical operas on piano, right? Because they got hit in the head. How does that happen? I don't know. But yeah, I do think that because autistic kids have some deficiencies, that their brain has kind of shifted the so abilities, so turned on abilities to compensate for the disabilities, right? Um,
But I'm kind of
and
saying, could it have been an evolutionary effect as opposed to a telekinetic kind of supernatural, like kind of,
but
I don't
what?
even know if
But
supernatural.
nothing we know within modern science would explain that, right?
Yeah,
They're communicating with other people across large distances. Yeah, sure. If evolution made that happen, then that would be an argument for consciousness being the fundamental force of the universe. It's the only way that's possible is by assuming that we don't actually know how the world works at all, right? Like, through the modern materialistic worldview, telepathy is 100% impossible. Impossible.
yeah. I,
And
I agree with you,
so
and there obviously are a lot of things that we can't explain. So I mean, obviously, it's definitely possible, but
it's, I think we're coming full circle, because I said towards the beginning of this conversation,
yeah,
it's that stuff, those unexplainable things, that when you shift to looking at the world through a consciousness worldview, all of a sudden don't seem that crazy anymore. Like, it makes total sense. Telepathy definitely is possible if consciousness is the fundamental force in the universe. Getting downloads, like I claim that I sometimes do, is totally possible if we live in a consciousness based world. Having near death experiences, afterlife, reincarnation, all of these things could go from being like weird and confusing to being like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense, if you just shift from a materialist to an idealistic worldview.
but see, part of the thing that kind of going back to being, instead of being one or the other, maybe being both or whatever, like, isn't there a possibility that it could even happen in a materialist world? Because like 100 years ago we wouldn't think that we would be able to be talking like this, but we've scientifically, obviously, telekinesis hasn't been proven scientifically like this has, but maybe there is some sort of material, like maybe
I'm
there's
totally
maybe the
open to some kind
brainwaves.
of, sorry to interrupt you. I'm totally on board with some kind of hybrid explanation here. I don't know how to put words around that, but yeah, it's certainly possible that it's some of each or both, all of the above. Is a reasonable worldview, right? So some people can believe in a materialist worldview, some people believe in an idealist worldview, and then I have no problem at all if some people also believe it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, because it seems like potentially, like, you're, even if it is physical, like the brain waves, just like the Wi-Fi works or whatever, the brain waves could be somehow traveling to the other person, you know?
Sure, electricity, right? Like, if you want to talk about, like, that electricity can move through the air, which it can, right? Static electricity, that's real. That's materialistic. If you figured out some worldview model where consciousness is similar to static electricity, then there's no reason that my consciousness couldn't go into your brain even from a long distance, right? I mean, I think the explanation comes from the quantum world, right? Like
Like quantum entanglement, like where it's
spooky action at a distance. I'm sure you've heard that term.
yeah.
Two particles that were ever connected, even once separated by vast distances, are still entwined. And so we don't really understand how that works or why that works, but it's a scientific fact that that actually is how it is. So if that's true, then yeah, my brain and your brain, or especially even more so, you and your fiance who are bonded in some way, you're connected, even when you separate by distance, would still somehow be entangled. Like I can make that seems like a logical jump, right? Like the part that's weird and is hard to make the jump is even that works on the quantum world, that two particles that were once connected are separated now and they're still connected. That's the mind bending part, right? But once you get past that, then the idea that two human brains could communicate without a phone, that's not that crazy of a jump.
Yeah, I mean, it could also be a psychological thing where you're like just happen to be thinking about each other at the same time.
I mean, that's more of, I would put, like, I'd call that a coincidence, right? But
Yeah,
Carl Jung doesn't believe in coincidence.
yeah. In terms of religion, you said like earlier on that I asked you when you were talking, like, because you were saying how, whatever, however long ago it was that they came up with these beliefs, that it was an idealist kind of belief, and I was like, does that matter though? Like, did they know something? Like, do you feel like these people who wrote the Bible or the Hindu stuff or the Buddha stuff, do you feel like they like how, like why? I don't necessarily think that they knew more than we do. Like, or do you feel like they had some sort of
I,
insight for some
yeah,
reason?
no, I do think that pre-modernity, people were more connected to the spiritual realm and had insights that we don't have in the modern day. Um, and I would definitely include all the mystic, the Hindu mystics, the Jewish mystics, the Christian mystics, and Jesus Christ in that. I then don't know though the Bible itself, or certainly the church as it became an institution. Rather, Jesus was one thing, but then after his death, it became an institution. That institution is materialistic. And why that happened is what we were speculating on before. I'm not really sure if that's the right explanation or not. It's also about control, right? It's a lot easier to control people when they believe in heaven, in hell, right? And you can and hell, um, in my view, in my worldview, monist worldview, there's no such thing as hell. So it would be hard to use eternal damnation to control a large population of people if they didn't believe hell existed.
Do you think it's only good afterlife? Like, do you think everybody gets an afterlife? And what do you, I mean, what do you think the afterlife is then?
Uh, so I think most most immediately we return to pure consciousness. So we leave the physical body and we rejoin the universal consciousness. Remember, I'm a monist, so there's only one consciousness. There's not my consciousness and your consciousness and the rock's consciousness. There's just one. So when I leave my physical body, I rejoin the one consciousness. Uh, this isn't my metaphor. You'll hear it through lots of different thinkers talk about it like this, but think about the ocean and a wave, right? So each wave is, we're each like a wave. Ocean is consciousness. We, for a finite amount of time, we kind of rise out of the sea we don't separate. We're still part of the ocean, but we're a defined piece, part of the ocean. And then when we die, when that wave breaks, it returns and just becomes part of the ocean again. So that is my core belief. I also, more and more over time, lean towards some form of reincarnation. But that there's other universes beyond our universe, and we can be reincarnated in human form. We could be reincarnated in some other, in animal form in this universe, but we can also be reincarnated into other universes in forms that we don't even understand or know what they are in space-time. So that's what I
Do you
believe.
think there's any morality to that? Like, if like the type of thing where if you've lived a good life, you'll get like maybe a better
That's
life?
I don't so it's not so much about good and bad as experiencing stuff. I think I think our job in the universe is to experience. Some of us experience good stuff, some of us experience bad stuff. God, consciousness, doesn't care, unfortunately. And this is hard for people that are more religious to hear, because they think of this loving God who cares about them. God doesn't care, because it's not a, it's like gravity. It's a force. It just applies consciousness constantly. And sometimes that manifests in good ways, and sometimes that manifests in bad ways. I will say that there's at least some of me that thinks it all cosmically balances out over time, that like maybe we each have to experience everything eventually. And so if this lifetime is really awesome and great, some other lifetime is going to be really shitty and bad, because I need to experience both sides of it.
Okay. And then in terms of the religion thing, you said you were raised Jewish, right?
Yep.
But do you consider yourself Jewish now?
No, culturally Jewish, not religiously. If anything, I would prescribe more to Kabbalah, which is the mystical side of Judaism. And Kabbalah is more idealistic and probably monist, whereas the Jewish religion as an institution, similar to the Christian church, has become materialist and dualist. So I think both for Judaism and Christianity, mystical Judaism and mystical Christianity were idealist, monist, and the institutions have become materialist, dualist.
Okay. I always ask this question, and I mean it like in the nicest way, but I know some people get offended by it. But like when there are so many successful Jewish people, like what do you think that is? Like, is it the way like Jewish people are raised, or like
I think it's. I mean, I've never. Uh, I'd have to give it some thought and give you a good answer, but I think there's two things come to mind off the top of my head, which is, first of all, for various reasons, Jewish people have been blessed with good educations. They're for a large extent affluent, and so can afford good educations, and so therefore that is a starting point that gives them an advantage. Also, the sense of community, which I think was always there historically with in the Jewish faith and tradition, but even more so in the modern day because of what's happened to the Jewish people. They've really rallied as a community around each other and really support each other as a community. And the value of community means that it produces more successful people, right? And especially when you have successful people within a community, they can help create more successful people, right? It kind of becomes a snowball effect where you have a very small community. People, if you have never looked it up, there's not that many Jews in the world. It's a teeny tiny religion that
It's
like
like one. It's like 1%, right?
I don't know the exact, but it's teeny tiny. Buddhism is bigger, Hindu is bigger, Christianity is bigger, everything's bigger than Judaism. Teeny tiny. But you have some very successful people, well educated, with resources in this community, and between that and their sense of community, that allows to, it's kind of like, all boats rise together, right? Where because it's a tight knit community, and because there's a tradition of education and community, et cetera, that they've been able to have outsized success. But as far as any it's never done me any good, right? If there's some global conspiracy where the Jews are all helping each other get rich and famous, someone come sign me up for that, because I've never benefited off that.
Yeah, and I don't think that. However, I don't even necessarily think that would. Well, I don't think it's bad to have a good community in your religion. You know what I mean? Obviously, Christians do the same thing, and you know, um, but I mean, I more just look at it as being kind of, I'm surprised and what do you call it? I look at it as like a positive thing. You know what I mean? It's like,
I
wow,
point to
it's really hard.
education and community as the two, and resources, right? There is money there, and when you have money, it's easier to make more money, right? So they have the resources, they have the education, and they have the community, and those are three powerful elements.
Yeah, and then so in terms of the AI, do you think? And then we can wrap things up. Do you think the AI will become? Speaking of consciousness and AI, do you think AI will become conscious?
Yeah, no, I don't. I
No,
think people
ever.
can conflate intelligence and consciousness. We're currently not even trying to build consciousness. We're building compute, which is intelligence. It's not consciousness. Again, I believe that. Well, I mean, to some extent, I believe there's consciousness imbued in everything. So AI will have some level of consciousness, but not in the way we're talking about. I think consciousness is non-local. Like, my brain doesn't create consciousness. If my brain did create consciousness, we would probably be able to engineer eventually, would be further off, but we would eventually be able to engineer a synthetic brain, aka a computer, that could manifest consciousness. But I don't believe that my brain creates consciousness. I believe my brain receives consciousness from elsewhere outside of space-time. And so in that worldview, it's getting dark in here. In that worldview, that's worse. Sorry about that. In that worldview, there is no way that we could ever build a synthetic brain that could receive consciousness. Just not possible.
So you think even if we built a brain just like ours to work just like ours, it still wouldn't work? It would still be conscious.
I mean, I guess
unconscious.
if we get to the point where we can actually build an actual brain out of cells, then maybe that would become a receiver for consciousness. But I don't believe we'll ever be able to take something that's made out of microchips and wires and mimic a human brain to the level where it would be able to receive consciousness. Again, consciousness is non-local. It's coming from outside of me, and I'm receiving it. So I don't know, maybe in the distant future, if we figure out what consciousness is, then maybe we'd be able to devise a device to receive it. But currently, we're not even trying to do that. we're trying to build a device that mimics intelligence. And intelligence and consciousness are very different things.
Yeah. And then so in terms of you said you have some AI companies, or what are your companies?
Yeah, so I run a consultancy called Quantum Impact, but my big thing right now is a AI automation company called Penless. Like pending, but nothing is pending, so it's penless.com. And it's basically a browser automation, which means that anything that happens inside of a browser window, like, you go to your bank you go to your bank website, or to the government website, or to any website, or a platform that's built within a browser, we can automate away any tasks in that browser. And this is a business, I mean, consumers can use it, it's fun, whatever, but it's really a business to business tool, because a lot of companies have repetitive actions where they have to do some browser action hundreds, if not thousands of times a day. So to give you an example, 30% of commerce happens via email, right? People text or send an email to a company placing an order. I want to order whatever, this t-shirt in size small, and I want you to send it to this address. And the company that receives that email probably gets dozens, it depends how big the company is, but they could get dozens or hundreds or even thousands of emails like that a day or a week or whatever. And right now, those companies have someone on staff whose whole job it is to go to that email box, extract the information from the email box, and then go to the fulfillment platform and enter that information into that platform so that the order gets fulfilled and blah, blah, blah. We can fully automate that away, and it just happens automatically. And that person used to be their job can now do something that is more human. They can interact with your clients. They can, build your business in some more tangible way. So these monotonous things like data entry and filling in forms and all of that kind of stuff, we can fully automate 100%. And that means for a company, maybe you're getting just a couple orders like that a day, then that frees up. I mean, if it takes you, say, 5 minutes every time you get an email like that, you go extract the information, bring it over to the other platform, enter it in. It takes you 5 minutes each. If you're getting 10 orders like that a day, that's 50 minutes a day, every single day. That's, 4 or 5 hours a week that you're saving. If you work for a company that gets hundreds or thousands of those orders a day, that company probably has numerous people on staff who their whole job is check the email, bring it over here, enter it into the other platform. And those jobs won't exist a year from now.
So where do you think AI is going in general within the next 5, 10, 25, 50 years? Like, how close are we, do you think, to the singularity or AGI or super
Within our
intelligence?
lifetimes. I think within the next decade, we're going to see fireworks that people are not ready to see. Again, people are still busy complaining about, I don't know what they're complaining about, that it's stealing artists' jobs or something like that. This is just a silly argument. It's not stealing any real artists' jobs. It's stealing shitty artists' jobs. Okay? Right now, today, I can buy a factory-made wooden kitchen table for whatever, $1,000. Or I can buy a very, very similar wooden table, but it was handcrafted by a craftsman, and it costs $10,000. And they're very similar. It's almost hard to tell. You have to actually like go inspect it to actually even tell the difference. But people still pay $10,000 for handcrafted tables if they can afford it. And it's only the thousand, the factory stamped $1,000 one that that AI is going to automate away. If you're following my example here, good artists will still be good artists, and there'll always be a demand for good human art. In fact, I think there'll be even more of a demand for good human art. But like corporate art and like, banner ads and stuff like that, that's not art. And yeah, let the AI do that crap. That's my opinion. And I think within a couple years, you're going to see massive unemployment. I'm not excited about that, right? Again, like I told you, I worked in politics and activism for 15 years of my life trying to address these situations. What we need to do is reimagine our society for a post-work world. And I'm not saying no one will work or you never have to work, but it's certainly not going to be a situation where everyone is forced to work 40 hours a week to get your basic sustenance. So I don't know what it's going to be. We need to reimagine society. AI is a game changer to the extent of like fire, when we harnessed fire or electricity, right? Electricity changed everything. And I believe AI is going to change literally everything. And it's up to us whether that's going to lead to dystopia or utopia. And we get to choose right now. But I think we're, for the most part, asleep at the wheel and not consciously choosing either. And that's potentially going to lead to very poor outcomes.
Well, it's weird being like asleep at the wheel when so many people have said how dangerous it could be. It's like if the government's asleep at the wheel at this point, it's like, man, you guys got to wake
How
up.
many times the term artificial intelligence was uttered during any of the potential presidential debates in the last cycle? The answer is zero.
Yeah,
Zero.
yeah.
They
They're not
talked
even.
about they talked about crypto, and I'm not anti-crypto, but on the levels of magnitude of the potential for world-altering, crypto is nothing compared to AI. Yet it was we didn't talk about it in the last presidential election. It was literally not even discussed. I will make a prediction that in the next presidential election, it is probably the number two topic. Number one topic being, our left-right divide.
Yeah, crypto almost seems like I mean, I think it actually probably is maybe doing well, but it just seems like it's such like a fucking like hoax or something. Like because there's been so much like crypto scams and
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, most of it is a hoax or a scam, but the underlying technology is powerful technology that has already been uh, consumed into our society, right? Like big banks are using blockchain. They're not necessarily using crypto, but blockchain is the underlying technology that powers crypto. And blockchain is being adopted across mainstream industries. They're just not talking about it. Like they're not saying crypto and blockchain and stuff because crypto and blockchain has got this bad reputation because a lot of it is scammy. But yeah, the idea that they were talking about crypto, even still, I mean, today, wherever you stand on the political spectrum, this is kind of above and beyond the left right divide, right? Like the fact that no one in our government from either party is really talking about AI and what it's already doing to our society. It's just not, people are talking way more about crypto still than AI, which is to me freaking lunacy, right? Like we all complain about how social media has had all this terrible effect on our minds and our psyche and on our society in general. Yet again, compared to AI, the impact of AI is going to make social media look like a nothing, a big nothing. So
Yeah.
if you're one of the, and I'm not talking to you particularly, anyone that's listening, if you're one of those people that is angry that we weren't more proactive about social media, then you should get really, really, really angry that the government on both parties is not currently being a lot more proactive about AI.
Yeah. And then which side are you on? If you don't
I
mind me
mean, what do you
asking.
mean by
Are you
side?
What?
What do you mean by side?
Well, I mean, are you Republican or Democrat?
Oh, I think they're both fucking idiots.
What side, what side are you on? Is it like
I define myself as a radical centrist, which mean I'm not a centrist in the traditional sense. The traditional sense of centrist was like, let's water everything down and like just do something that is not going to piss anyone off, but it also isn't going to make anyone happy. Radical centrism is no, we're not going to just kind of find some weak middle point. We need radical change in this country, but it's not radical left change and it's not radical right change. It's just radical change. And that there's some really good ideas on the left and some really good ideas on the right, but there's also some really terrible ideas on the left and some really terrible ideas on the right. And we need to sort through it all and pick out the ideas that work and serve our needs as a society and get rid of all the rest.
yeah, it's a joke as of right now, it just seems like it's a joke. But well, I mean, what do you think about what do you think about like what's it called? Like techno anarchism or whatever? Like what do you think about like Peter Thiel and like these types of guys? Do you know Peter Thiel?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I
Or
think,
like Mark Andreessen or like
yeah, I mean, I think they are using tech hype to cover for their their uh, narcissism. I mean, I think you can be pro AI and uh, not a techno fascist.
yeah.
I mean,
And then in
again,
terms
I
of
believe AI is going to lead to. I mean, I guess Peter Thiel would probably think I'm the Antichrist, right? Because I do think AI is going to lead to a spiritual revolution and a newfound belief in a common. And again, I don't think this is going to happen overnight, and there's probably going to be wars fought over it. I'm talking over decades and generations, but I believe in the long. So in short, my AI belief is we're headed for a really rough, really rocky transition period that is going to suck for a lot of people because the government's not doing anything about it. We're not being proactive. If we had done something back in 2018 when I was running a super PAC begging both parties to do something about this, maybe we would have a shot. But that ship has sailed. We're now here. We're not being proactive. We're not doing anything about it. So we are going to suffer, and it's going to really suck. And I don't know how long that period is going to last because it's determined by the decisions we make from today going forward. But regardless of how long it lasts, maybe it's just a couple years, maybe it's decades. I do think we come out the other side with a newfound unity and collective spirit. And I think that is something to be optimistic about. But yeah, Peter Thiel thinks that I'm the Antichrist. Yeah.
yeah. That whole thing is so crazy how he like is giving like speeches on it, but like I mean,
I
I
mean,
don't really
I
know.
think he's like borrowing some shit from Christianity, some shit from the like Silicon Valley playbook, and some shit from his own narcissist psyche, and he's kind of mixing and matching it all together to like just to excuse him doing whatever the fuck he wants to do. Excuse my language.
Yeah, and it's like whatever game he's playing, just it seems weird. Like I've heard a lot of bad stuff about him, and it's like I don't know the truth, but it's like he like I don't know. I guess it shouldn't matter that much, but like he's like gay or whatever, but then he's like saying that he's like Christian or whatever, and he's like Republican. I mean, I'm assuming he's
Yeah, no, he's a big Trump supporter, also
yeah,
very out as a gay man
which
and
seems weird to me because it's like they
Christian.
don't.
Yeah, it's a very weird combination. Um, but you know, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, I think there's probably more of this than we realize. The world isn't as black and white as people want it to be, right? There's lots of gay people that are Republican, and there's
Yeah,
lots of gay people that are Christian, right? We just don't talk about them because it doesn't fit the like mainstream model of how Western society is supposed to work. And but I'm also sure that it's not Peter Thiel per se, but like in general, being a homosexual Christian must be a really tough thing, right? Like, and you must have to grapple with your own belief systems. But if you're Christian and you truly believe, and you also just happen to be gay or bisexual or whatever you are, then you have no choice but to find some way to make these two things work together. And the same goes for Republican. If you're a Republican, right? Like, yeah, it doesn't on the surface make a lot of sense to be homosexual and a Republican, but there's lots of them out there. And so there, you know, if your worldview just happens to be that you are more on the right, but you also just happen to biologically be homosexual, like that is what you are, and you got to find some way to integrate the different sides of yourself into a whole, even though society is telling you that you're a square peg in a round hole.
yeah. Like it's a totally valid thing, and like same thing with like Candace Owens. Like she's like a black, Republican, but you know who she is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but it's like I mean it's easy. I think it's like I automatically assume with those types of people that they're just like grifting. But it's like, yeah, you never know. They could just be speaking their truth. But it seems like with most of those people, they're just grifting. They're just trying to make as much money as possible. But I mean, not only her, but
Yeah,
anybody who's
no,
doing
I
like what she's
agree.
doing.
I agree for the most part. Peter Thiel is a little different situation. I can't figure that dude out. I mean, he doesn't need
Yeah.
to grift, right? He's got all the money he ever needs. I don't know. I don't know. He's a weird. He's a weird one.
Yeah, same with Elon Musk.
Yeah, Musk. Musk, I think is a lot of the times he's just screwing with the world. I think
I
he's
mean, that seems
screwing
so
with us.
weird to me to be like at that level and you're just like literally fucking around. Like you're just yeah, exactly. You're like trolling the
Trolling.
world.
He's trolling. Yeah.
But it's like with the world. It's not just with like your,
Well, if you're the richest man in the world is your playground, right? Like
yeah.
if you're the richest, and Peter Thiel too, right? These people they consider themselves gods, right? So like the world is their playground, and if you're going to play, you're going to play on the biggest playground there is, and that's the world stage.
Yeah. Like Musk, like I mean, he was even fucking with Trump. And it's like at this point you almost wonder if he's got more power than Trump, even.
He probably does. I mean, in some ways, he does. He has more long-standing power than Trump, right? Trump's gonna be in buried and Elon is still gonna be one of the richest men in the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, I think I think Silicon Valley is probably more powerful. Maybe not more powerful than the American government, but probably more powerful than most governments. Certainly more powerful than like the government of like name some second tier, if we take away America and China and whatever, a couple of the maybe Germany, whatever, the Japan, whatever, the big company countries, The next tier down, I think Silicon Valley is certainly more powerful than like the Canadian government.
Yeah, definitely some of the smaller countries. I heard Musk say recently, like they were like saying something about him being the richest man. And he's like I think Putin's richer than me, and it's like like it just seems like I don't know, it just seemed kind of like okay, Putin. It's like um but I thought that was funny. But so what do you think that so who do you think the major players are going to be? And then the light just like went on again. Who do you think the major players are going to be with AI? And then what do you think their like what do you think Sam Altman's goals are? What do you think he or any of them want?
I
Just
mean,
super intelligent money or
people
like
are complex, right? Like it doesn't have to be all one thing. I think Sam Altman both has a very altruistic aim and wants to get as rich and powerful as he can. I think both of those things can be true at the same time. So I do think he is pushing us towards AGI as fast as possible, both because he's fearful that if we don't get there, if we, being the West or free, open society, doesn't get there first, that there would be significant negative consequences. You know, for example, if South Korea or North Korea got AGI before we did, that could be really bad, right? So that's part of it. And I
or
also
even China.
or China, or yeah. So there's that. There's also the piece where I think he believes that we can cure cancer and we can give every single kid in the world, including kids that are currently, living in poverty in India or Africa or wherever, that in the not too distant future, they can be living in the first world, and that they can be getting the level of education higher than even current day Western education. I mean, the American education system is a big joke at this point anyway, but that we can basically give every kid in the world a private tutor. There's this theory, like, why don't we have more geniuses in the world today? Like all the great geniuses, the Mozarts and the Leonardo da Vinci's and all the great geniuses of the past happened at a time when there was much less people on Earth and way, way less people who were well educated. So now that there's all these more people and many more people getting a good education, we should have a lot more geniuses in the world than we currently do. And people have tried to figure out why this is. And the closest I've heard, or what rings true for me, is that all of those great, the masters that we consider, Da Vinci and Mozart and all of them, all had individualized private tutoring from the time that they were very young. They were all came from wealthy families that recognized ability in them from an early age, and they were guided through their adolescence and their education by private tutors and mentors. And so if we could give every kid in the world a digital tutor mentor who can guide them through their educational journey and also identify like what makes them unique and special, and then help nurture that in them, then I think we can unlock both genius level, but also we can bring every kid in the world up to a decent standard, right? Where current day we have Western education, even though I think it's pretty crappy, is compared to no education is obviously really great, right? And like I mentioned, in countries in Africa and India, there's kids that are not even going to school, right? They're or maybe there's like one schoolhouse and it's for all the kids in the region and whatever else. They have very low levels of education. I think AI can solve that. I think AI can cure every known disease in the next 20 years ish. And I think that is part of Sam's motivation. I also think he's human, so he also wants to get as rich and powerful as he possibly can.
Yeah. So you think that's a do you think that eternal life living forever will be possible within the next like
I don't know about forever, but we're certainly going to extend the lifespan significantly. I
if they
think
can cure all diseases like you just said in 20 years, that's pretty good.
aging isn't considered a disease. So there is a school of thought right now to start considering aging as a disease and trying to cure it. But that's a, that's some next level next level. But yeah, I think if we can cure most known diseases or all known diseases, we can make people like the average lifespan up to like 100, 120. There's a school of thought that there is a limit to that. But then there's also a school of thought that we could learn how to reverse aging. And I think that is all happening. And I think in some respects it's good, right? The part where we cure cancer, that's a good thing. On the other hand, I don't know, like, if we really become immortal, first of all, we're opening a can of worms that, like, there's so many problems there. Like, if we all become immortal, but yet we continue to reproduce, like, what we're gonna have to become interplanetary and like spread amongst the stars, blah blah blah.
Which is also
Also,
what they wanted.
if you're gonna become immortal, are you gonna like meet someone in your 20s and marry them and then spend eternity with them? Like, how does that work? Right? Like,
Yeah,
but
it would totally change.
even putting that stuff aside, I think it's also screwing with, like, well, so let's say um reincarnation is real and that we're actually supposed to live numerous lifetimes so that we can experience different things. We can experience being an alien, we can experience being a rock, I can experience being a man and a woman and a Republican and a Democrat and a Hindu and a this and a that. If that is how it's supposed to happen and we stop that process from happening by curing or ending death, then we're tinkering with the primordial nature of the universe, right? In a way that I'm not sure we're supposed to be doing. But I think we're going to find out.
It's going to be interesting. And then, so you said you won an Emmy for what'd you win for?
I was nominated. Sorry, I didn't win an Emmy. I was nominated for an Emmy. It was called Imaginary Bitches. It was actually it's a digital series. It was this is 2007, or we made it in 2007. It came out in 2008. The Emmy nomination was 2008. I don't know if you remember much about 2008, but there were no web series in 2008. No one had heard that term. That term, I think, first got coined around 2007. There were no web series. There, like, YouTube was still just like in its infancy, and it was still mostly like cat videos and people doing dumb stunts. No one was using the internet for narrative entertainment at that point. So we were the very first, we were the second ever web series, the first non-studio the first independent web series to ever be nominated for an Emmy, which, was certainly cool back in 2008, but it feels like ancient history now.
And what did you do on it?
I was producer, lead producer.
Right. Yeah. That's cool. All right, so I gotta go, but the last question to ask is anything you're into as far as podcasts, music, movies, TV shows, books, whatever.
There are lots of stuff. As far to tie into this conversation, I really like YouTube channel, Jesse Michaels' YouTube channel. There's another one called Third Eye Drops that I'm a big fan of.
Who's Jesse Michaels? Is he like a consciousness guy?
No, he actually used to work for Thiel, I think. He came out of investment broker. He was an investment broker or something, but has this tremendous knowledge or interest and now knowledge that he's pursued in kind of all this stuff. He talks about like the alien phenomenon. He talks about like hidden knowledge. He talks about uh, yeah, all these related topics dancing around. And so Third Eye Drops is similar. It's even more so, a little more edgy, less buttoned up, I guess you'd say. But it's about, he has lots of things about consciousness, about UFOs, about DMT experiences, and all that stuff.
And it's all like legit stuff. Like it's all like factual or whatever, both of them.
Well, Jesse Michaels uh, is very factual based. Third Eye Drops brings on guests who it's up to you whether you think it's true or not, right? Like just the same
Yeah.
as with me. Like I'm sitting here telling you I believe we live in an idealist, monist world. Is that fact based? No, but
That's
it's
not that crazy though. I mean, it's not, like obviously like half the like a lot of
so
people believe in that. Yeah.
So he's bringing on people that have had significant experiences. Either some of them are like with aliens or consciousness, but also like, government contractors who are, declassifying information, et cetera, et cetera. If you're interested in any of this stuff, just give both of those channels a check. Jesse Michaels and Third Eye Drops. Also, Donald Hoffman and especially Bernardo Kastrup puts a lot of content on YouTube. Uh,
Yeah.
he does, I think, weekly series, both debates with other people, and also including, and I respect him for this, people who don't agree with him. Right, so it's not a sycophant situation in a bubble. He's actually reaching outside of his bubble to have these conversations. Um, and so, yeah, I also, what else? I don't know. I love the band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
That's an interesting
And they
band.
have their last album, which is actually my least favorite of their albums, but it has a song on it called Panpsychism, which I thought was kind of awesome. I'm not a
Yeah.
huge fan, but people tell me that I should be a big fan of the band Tool because apparently Tool's lyrics are all based on this stuff and like Plato and Jungian philosophy and this stuff. So I think I need to check out Tool, but I was never into like super heavy metal like that. So I've always avoided it. But anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Sorry that it got dark and then it got light, but maybe that's symbolic in some way of our conversation. And
Did you know why it got light again randomly? It like randomly got light again.
I eventually turned on. I tried to
Oh,
turn on this light and it looked all ugly. So then I turned on this other light and it now looks okay, but still a little fuzzy.
yeah. The last guy that I had on about consciousness, but he had his own theory that like just didn't line up with anything. But there was like the whole time he was an old guy and there was like this like light like kind of glowing on his face, and he was talking about like spirituality and stuff. So it fit. But yeah, thanks for coming on. If you want me to put up any of like your links to your company or whatever, I'll do that. And then if you ever want to come back on, let me know because I know this stuff can go for a while. You know what I mean?
Awesome. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It was fun. And I think we're going to have, big, in our lifetime, we're going to see big things. So hopefully it's for the better. Like I said, I am a little worried about the short term future of our society, but in the long term, I think we're going to be okay.
All right, sounds good.
Have a good
Thanks.
one, man. Be well.
Bye, guys.